Pre-Qualification work session. Tonight we have Executive Affairs going first. We're going to take things out of order to accommodate Ms. Dina Thompson, the Executive Director for the Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition. At this point, Ms. Thompson, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, and thank you all, board members. I'm so happy to be here. As I said a little earlier today, I got to start my day off in Buffalo Public Schools. I get to end it in Buffalo Public Schools. In the middle, I did some trauma-informed care with the trainers today for the student support team. So it's been a day in BPS. But today I come before you as you introduced me. My name is Dina Thompson, Executive Director of Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition, and I would say dear friend and partner of Buffalo Public Schools. I'm basically, for the sake of time, I know that people have been in meetings all day. I'm just going to kind of read a proposal that we are presenting before the board today. Good evening, Dr. Cash. I just saw you pop up on our screen today. It's good to see you. So Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition, we are proposing to the Buffalo School Board to engage in a process that invites all members and voices to be heard in a restorative practice consultation and responsive circles. We want to provide a safe space for each member to be listened to and to collectively come to a consensus of how to address harm that may have been caused through engagement, but also how do we build strong positive relationships also through that engagement. And so through this process, what we would like to do is we would like to introduce what are restorative responsive circles and what does that process look like. And so as a board, really creating that common language about how to engage with each other and then how to address when harms have occurred. We would also like to propose in bringing the board members together an opportunity to meet with each and every board member. So really finding out from their perspective, maybe some of the harms that have been caused and ways in which harms can be repaired so that people can move forward in a positive way. We also would like to, based on those conversations, meet with a person that the board chooses as a consultant so that we can plan the implementation of working with the board to have these conversations together and really how to plan the circles that best meet the needs of the people within the group. We also would like to carve out time to have about 4 of these circles collectively with everyone participating. And so really addressing what are the underlying issues that might be causing some harms amongst this community. And then if there are, and if we're looking at the restorative process that is done on a continuum, there is a part that we are meeting together that's we're responding to some harms that have been done as a collective group. And then the very end of the continuum is there are some really maybe harmful measures, as what we call have been committed. And then what we would do for that is we would offer a formal conference and bringing those people most impacted by a particular incident together and having a conversation about how to repair the harm. The end of that would mean that the board would work better together. We would establish guidelines in that process. We would establish values within that process in which we could create a safe space for us to work together. This is a confidential process, and so we would be signing confidentialities, both myself and I usually work with a co-facilitator, so we would work together. This would be a confidential process. And I just want to kind of encourage the good work that comes out of doing these responsive circles and these restorative circles. We have worked with organizations such as Try It Industries, Best Self, M&T Bake, Push Buffalo, Buffalo Prep, Erie, which is Partners in Restorative Justice Initiative. We work with probation. We work with the Center for Resolution and Justice, a number of public schools, school districts, charter schools, and private schools. We have seen this. We have over 10 years, about 10 years of experience, not over, I don't want to age myself, about 10 years of experience of doing this work, and we have seen some very positive outcomes in communities that have used this process. And so it was brought to my attention. This is something that we actually use in Buffalo Public Schools to repair harm and move not only just students forward, but we can use this to move adults forward as well. So I'm here right now. If you have any questions about anything that I am proposing here today, I'm here to answer any questions that you may have or any concerns or what you're thinking.
Sure. Lou Petrucci here. I have one or two questions.
Sure.
So what would typically, how long do sessions last? What do they look like? Where would they be conducted? Just kind of a general overview of what the program looks like.
That's great. Great question. So usually we spend about anywhere from 30 to an hour meeting with people individually, and that would be taking place over Zoom. We're responding to the social distancing. And so we would also offer services as a group over Zoom as well. We can do in person if that's what people feel like they want to meet in person, but we are typically doing this over Zoom. And then it would last anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do any of the other board members have questions? Jen McCosey. Jen, you raise your hand very quickly.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Dana. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
So I have questions around, I know that once you meet with us all individually, initially, it's going to be a general, what are you thinking, what's going on? So say you were to dig deep into some issues that we really got to spend some time on. Then I go back to the question of how long are you willing to, are we going to take this to the extent, or are we, short of just this contract or whatever we're dealing with? Are you in it for the long haul is basically what I'm saying.
Yes, we are. I'm in it for the long haul personally, and so is my co-facilitator, which is another experienced facilitator within the community of Buffalo. So yes, we are both in it for the long haul.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. We are not limited by the time frame that we have proposed. We just thought that would just be a start. I also would like to say that restorative practice, this is not easy work. So I'm not trying to say this is easy. This is hard work. When we are dealing with relationships, it's a lot of hard work. There's work that we do together, and there's work that you do when you're on your own. But what I do know is that through this process, people do move forward. Organizations do move forward in a better way. And there's a clearer way to communicate and engage with each other where people are seen and heard from a very authentic way. So it just kind of breaks down a lot of those barriers. And that's part of the hard work, right? It's getting to those underlying issues, creating a space where we can be open and vulnerable in those issues so that we can share and be able to move forward. So our job is to create and maintain those safe spaces for that to happen. That comes a lot when we get to know you through those personal interviews, or just those personal conversations, because we have to build trust with you as well. And so that's part of our engagement together.
Thank you.
Much. Ms. Belton Cotman, followed by Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown. President Cotman.
So thank you, Dina, for your presentation. You and I had an initial conversation in regards to this, and I made the recommendation that Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition work with the board, and I still think it's a very good idea. I am looking. Hopefully, the board will agree to that as we move forward and try to gel this situation here to make it flow more fluently and be more productive. My concern is that if any board member is not interested in doing this, that the board members speak up front, and that we know so that we don't waste your time, and that we move forward. There is a need in any organization to work on interpersonal relationships. I have been in sales my entire lifetime, and I can't even tell you some of the practices we did. We were out there on the Niagara underneath the water pool bridge in a team building exercise, and all of us got soaking wet. And I think we learned the lesson: if you get wet, if nothing else, if you go on that boat, that hydroplane. So I've seen this work, and I know it can be a success. And so with that, I want to thank you for coming today and providing that with us, the information for us to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Cotman. Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown, the floor is yours.
All right, so Dina, thank you. I think we've met in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So here's my question. I have a statement and a question. So you know how Beyonce get on stage and she turned into Sasha, something like that? So because you have relationships here, you know, probably some personal relationships as well, do you change your mindset and focus in on, you know, being like a Sasha, for example?
Mm-hmm.
So that's really my main question, because I think, you know, I have, you know, done some training in restorative justice, and I use some of the practices with my own staff in my full-time work. So that probably is my question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that kind of thing?
Thank you. That is such a great question. And so as a facilitator, I'm a facilitator. In the place and space, that's what I bring. I bring that neutrality, which is what facilitators bring to the place and space. And so this is my work, and this is the work that I do in the space, which I'm hoping that people here can recognize that too. So when I do come into the place and space, this is what I'm doing. I'm facilitating a restorative practice conference, as well as when we pre-conference together as well. Does that answer your question? I'm professional in my work.
And I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we're going to have Terrence Hurd, followed by Jen McCosey. Mr. Hurd, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson, for offering your help. Let's have a couple of quick questions. Now, you said that this would be a meeting with each board member, and it'll last about an hour for each one time or each session. Would it be more than one, or just be one person per hour?
So each person we meet with individually, and then based on that individual, our individual conversations we would find out what is the thread that is the issue. So it might be multiple issues. That's why we're scheduling for multiple meetings. So it might be multiple issues. So everyone gets one time that we meet with them up to an hour, and that's what we call the pre-conference. Then with our person, whoever is designated on the board as our contact person, we kind of go through the whole plan of what we have discussed, and then we discuss like what is the circle that's going to be. So we have a point of contact person there, and then so this is the commitment on your part, and then we have scheduled 4 2-hour meetings to really come to a consensus about how we want to move forward. Is that clearer?
Okay, and the circle, the circle will be after information has been conveyed to you, and then the circle, would that be a public circle or would that be a private circle?
No, everything's private. It's just with this.
In attendance with it?
Here, just us here. So here, it would be the board and my co-facilitator.
Okay. And I know you said you're a very professional person, and I've personally seen that been through. The liabilities, everything stay intact between yourself, your aide, and board members.
Yes, and we will have every board member sign a confidentiality. So, you know, when you break also from this space, when you break from this space and you go back to your other space, this is a different space. So what we say, what is said here stays here, but what is learned here leaves here. So everything that we learn in here, we want to take with us, but what we say in this space remains confidential.
Okay, thank
Mhm.
Next, we have Board Member Makosi, followed by Paulette Woods. Board Member Makosi, you are up.
My hand was raised from before. I apologize. I'm good.
That's okay, Jen. Paulette Woods, the floor is yours.
Dina, my question to you is, you're aware of the divided state of this country where people have very, very strong, different opinions. Is your goal in these restorative sessions to give people the ability to disagree without being disagreeable? Because I don't think that if you looked at what happened in our nation's capital, there are some people who strongly believe that all voices aren't necessarily to be heard, and their facts are very different. You can't change their perspective. So,
Mhm.
my question is, your goal, given that you can't change people's perspectives specifically, is that they can at least work together and disagree without being disagreeable?
And so that is yes, because I do believe that people can work together and not necessarily agree on every aspect of it. But I also believe that we can put things in spaces and in places so that we can move forward and be able to agree in a way that we can get the work done that is necessary to be done, and also build the relationships that are necessarily to be built. And so even when we begin to look at our own relationships, I've been married a long time. I don't 100% agree with my husband, but we can maintain a relationship as we move forward by coming to a consensus about a way that we move forward. And when you talk about the nation's capital, we don't always agree even on politics or the way we raise our kids or anything like that, but we can agree on a way that we can move forward so that we can meet the goals and the expectations that we are here to meet. And that is that will be the focus here. We might not always agree, but we can come to a consensus in a way that we can move forward in a positive way and still respect each other.
Any other questions for Ms. Thompson? Okay, I don't hear anything. Thank you very much, Dina. Much appreciated. Great presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. All right, have a good evening, guys.
So,
Bye-bye.
Dina?
Bye.
Thank you, Dina. Bye-bye now.
Well, thank you very much. Do we want to do the board resolution phase 2 reopening or the policy updates, Darren? What do you feel?
If we do policy, the policy update will take really 5 minutes. Board members have received this information. This is really for the public because the board will be voting on these policies. They're currently tabled, and the board will be voting on them on March 17th. And I can give the highlights, and if any board members have in-depth questions about any of the policies, I can speak with them one-on-one. But I will let you know we also have additional policies that will be coming up to be tabled also. Not discussed here, but they will be additional policies, not new ones, but just reviews and updates of some of our current ones.
All right. So that sounds good, Darren. Why don't you provide us a quick update of our policies?
Absolutely. Mike Lucci, if you can put the policy PowerPoint up. There we go. If you can advance to the next slide. Mr. Lucci, thank you. So board policy 1210 deals with school board elections. As we know, the governor did sign Bill A4949B, which provides the elections of the school board members be moved to November rather than May. So we had to make sure that our policies reflected that. And so that policy update will be voted on by the board March 17th. Next slide, Mike. appointments and designations of the board. So this policy was revised so that in the Title IX of the educational amendments, the word compliance officer, we have to change our policies to civil rights compliance officer, because that's really what the compliance officer is focusing on, the civil rights. And we have to make sure the board appoints the Title IX coordinator of the district. That will be added to the list of appointments that the board does annually, and it will be the Title IX coordinator that the board will have to appoint. So that is a policy update, and that's policy 30.
Dr. Brown, President Cottman has a quick question.
All right, if everyone can mute, please. Yes, Board President Cottman.
So my question or my concern here is that it says this employee must be referred to as the Title IX coordinator. I would like to see that broadened so that in the event the board decides that we don't want to use an employee, that we might want to use a consultant or someone other than that. That's as our compliance officer. That's my concern with that.
Okay.
I'd like to see that broadened. That's all.
You know what? I'm going to circle that, and then I'm going to make a note of that. Okay.
Thank you.
Next slide, please, Mike. So with the board elections in 2022 being in November, we have to then move our reorganizational meeting to the first business day in January, beginning January 2023. That's where the president will be elected, the vice presidents, and then the board president can then appoint all of the chairs for the subcommittees. But that beginning in January 2023 will take place on the first business day in January following those November elections. Next policy, please, Mike. This policy deals with the pandemic, really, that we are living through right now. All school safety plans must have, and they must include protocols for responding to a declared public health emergency involving a communicable disease that are substantially consistent with the provisions of new labor law section 27C. So we have to make sure that all of our school safety plans are updated to include what will occur if we are in a situation like we're currently in, if that were to happen, God forbid, again. Next slide, Mike. Records management. So records management is going to be a two-part, because our records management policy is being updated so that we include the new schedule of how long we retain records for. So the new schedule, retention and disposition of schedule for New York local government records, LGS-1, supersedes and replaces our current records and retention schedule, ED-1. So at the board meeting on March 16th, there will be a resolution also for the district to adopt the new LGS-1, and we will also have a summary sheet there, maybe like a little cheat sheet, so you can see what we're referring to, because it lists every record that we have in the Buffalo Public Schools and how long we must keep them for. So student records, employment records, it lets us know. So we need to adopt that new schedule. Next slide, please, Mike. So this is a new policy. This deals with extraordinary circumstances like we're living through now. It just says that any executive order will govern and that our policies don't supersede federal, state, county law, regulation, or executive order. So all of those supersedes our policies during extraordinary circumstances. Next slide, please.
Darren, President Cottman has a question regarding
I'm sorry.
the last one.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the previous one.
Can we go back one slide, Mike?
So I just think that this is noteworthy, that as we move forward with our contract negotiations, that this is included in every one. It appears that it should be an automatic thought. I mean, an understanding that if the governor comes up with a change and he's mandating different things, but somehow or another, I seem to think that we lost some of that in the translation of late in regards to our contract. So I just want to make sure that that's a note for Nate Kuzman in moving forward, that definitely is involved in everything that we negotiate with, and including our contracts and our RFPs as well.
And I'll make
Because
a note of that also.
and the
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
reason I'm saying that is that one of the things that I'm hearing on some of the national calls is that school districts are now being sued for circumstances that they had no control over. And I just want to make sure that, you know, we broaden that in our district, because I think we're good, but I just want to make sure we're excellent with that. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
No, that's a great point, because this came up early back when we had to close our physical school buildings, but school was still taking place remotely. Many districts across the country were dealing with the fact that individuals were thinking that because teaching remotely wasn't in their teaching contract, that you know, they either had some say about it or can decide how that happened. However, because the governor ordered it, that we still educate, even though school buildings are closed, we need to be very clear that that supersedes any collective bargaining agreement. Correct. So that's a great point.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Next and final slide, I am going to need Jeff and Rick Fanton to help with the purchasing policy. This was an update to policy 5410. So if Jeff or Rick Fanton can chime in very quickly about this update.
Hear me, Darren?
Yeah, Rick, the update to policy 5410, the purchasing policy, we talk about the request for pre-qualification being utilized to vendors for on-demand services and the request for information. So just we wanted to make sure we were clear in there, the difference, if we can explain that to the board very quickly for policy 5410.
Certainly. So the request for pre-qualification is to identify and shortlist vendors for on-demand services such as repairs, emergency situations like PPE, also for the pre-K program. That's where we first use the request for pre-qualification. We're not asking for any pricing information, any costing information. We are simply looking at the qualifications of the vendors.
Thank you very much, Rick. Mrs. Collins?
I need more clarity with that. Are you saying this is done, and where in the process is this done, is my question.
In a lot of cases, this will replace an RFP.
A lot of places, this will replace an RFP?
Correct.
If I can jump in here, Sharon, because I use RFQs a lot in my job. So oftentimes we'll use them. Let's say you need to, you have a city program where you're going to replace hot water tanks. So you would collect a group of qualified contractors who agree to replace a hot water tank, you know, a certain type of tank at a certain price, and then you establish a wheel, and then they go through, and after you know, contractor A, and that's contractor B, contractor C, and you keep going around the wheel. And it's for things like that. So when they tend to be smaller things, you tend to increase participation, and it prevents you from having to do a full-on RFP for a lot of items that don't quite rise to that level, or they may cumulatively, but individually not so much.
Well, would this help? Could this help minority businesses at all? What is the impact? You have to fill out a form prior to, you're on record with the district. Is that what you're saying, as one of these pre-qualified vendors or whatever? I'm confused with that piece, I guess.
Mrs. Common, that's exactly it. You're describing a little bit more the request for information, but it applies for the request for pre-qualification as well. That's exactly it. We're trying to put together a list of vendors that we can move with rapidly. You know, a boiler tank breaks at one of the schools, we need to fix it right away. We may not, and we've done some expensive boiler repairs that exceed the threshold of $20,000 for board approval. If we have a list of pre-qualified vendors, we just get quotes out there, we get the vendor in, we get the situation fixed.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep. Are we ready for the request for information?
Yes, please, Rick.
Mr.
Okay.
Harry Pan is up.
Oh, I apologize.
I'm sorry, thank you. For 5410, let's have a question. Where will the list come from? Will we have say-so in the list? And will we require a vote from a board or anybody else to approve the project if it's void that?
That's an excellent question. The plan
My
is,
main concern is where.
you broke up a little bit on me there. Could you repeat that?
I'm sorry. My main concern is where would the list come from? How would the list be formulated?
Very
Could be a
similar.
number of different projects that can happen.
Very similar to how we do an RFP. We're going to put a formal offering out there. Vendors are going to respond. There's going to be threshold criteria for qualification. It's determined by the departments. That list will be maintained in the procurement portal. And that will allow us to maintain mailing lists, which we could not do previously. And again, generate a list of, these are people who can provide us with PPE. These are people who can fix boilers. These are people who can do glass repairs. We have a lot of on-demand services that we have not necessarily pre-identified qualified vendors for. The plan is that these pre-qualified vendors would then go to the board, at least as a notification. You know, here's the list of pre-qualified vendors. Does that answer your question?
Okay. As far as NWB status, how will we know that it'd be like an equal balance of opportunities for everyone that's on this list? Is there a list? Or check over the companies that.
But the goal of generating the lists is then we have a list where we're just issuing a quote at that point. So if you're on that list, that pre-qualified list, and we issue a quote, it's lowest quote at that point.
Okay, the lowest. Okay, can a person say if the list already be construct company or someone else have their name added to this list? Is there a limited number of people that can be on this list?
I hope it's completely unlimited. I would like to have as much competition as possible. I have no desire to limit these lists at all.
Okay.
All right.
And will this appear on our website just as if RFP?
It will, yes. It is another type of formal offering.
Thank you for that. Board Member Woods has her hand up.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to know what additional outreach are you going to do in this particular request for pre-qualifications that's going to expand the diversity in your list? What are you going to do differently? Because the complaint or the problem that we've been identifying is that the same people, Old Boys Network, gets their contract constantly, and we're trying to find ways to expand. So, and how is this going to expand your outreach or adding more people onto this? How is this going to give everybody a chance? That's really what the goal is.
Mrs. Woods, I'm actually going to ask you to table that to the MWBE presentation a little later, because I think it will become clear at that point.
Also, there is a clause in the MBE policy that you presented when we approved to raise the limit on purchases to 20,000 that don't have to come before the board. There was supposed to be a report telling us that though we didn't have to approve it, we did have oversight because we were supposed to get a report on who received these contracts, whether they were MBEs or what was being awarded without our approval. I don't recall seeing any reports like that recently.
Mrs. Woods, again, I'm addressing that issue in the MWBE presentation a little later.
Okay, thank you. Those are just my questions. I can wait.
Very valid points, but I think they'll be better addressed at that point of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Petrucci, do you have any questions? I don't see any other hands up.
I do not. Thank you, Darren.
All right, and I want to thank our colleagues for reviewing the policies. We will have additional policies, and we will keep the policies updated because we did so much work in 2019, updated the entire policy book. We want to keep it updated. So thank you very much for that.
All right. Last under executive affairs, we have the board resolution and phase 2 reopening updates.
Colleagues, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present you with an update on our phase 2 reopening plan. I've asked staff to be present this evening with you, and we will go through about 10 slides that I've been preparing with staff to go over with you this evening. You should have been sent a deck of these slides. I hope you do have them in your own computer email, and you can follow along with us. Mike Lucci, if you could pull up the slides, this is great. Hopefully you can hear me and we can turn to the next slide. Colleagues, I will present these first 2 slides and then I will introduce staff for the subsequent slides. You'll hear from Ann Botticelli in instruction. You'll hear from Jamie Warren giving us an update on the staffing relative to these phased reopenings. You'll hear from our ASL lead, Dr. Cassandra Wright, about what elementary and secondary principals have been up to and how they have been an integral part of the phase 1 and phase 2 planning. And then you'll hear from Tanja Williams or her stand-in today, Dr. Sharon Brown, give us a brief update on student support services around this important pandemic reopening work. And then finally hear from the operations department, specifically facilities and transportation. And that will conclude staff presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So if you could, as we typically do, note your questions for these different components of the 10-slide presentation, and we'll be happy to join a full discussion at the conclusion. So colleagues, these are COVID facts today. I think it's always helpful to sort of keep in a clear context what we're trying to do during this pandemic. You have to stay cognizant of what is going on in the nation and be quite clear about it. As I said, we talk with our medical director, Dr. Kuo, on a regular basis. And I want to make some main points here. On this slide, you can see that while we are decreasing the number of cases and the number of deaths in the country nationwide, we still are at a staggering number of cases, over 28 million nationwide, and we have passed the horrific total number of 515,000 deaths nationwide. We are averaging
Million.
I'm sorry, 515 million is, wait a minute. No, 515,000 deaths.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't gotten to millions yet. 515,000 deaths nationwide in this country. We are still, while we've come down from a toll, you will recall just 2 months ago where we were close to 4,000 deaths per day, we are now down to 2,000 deaths per day and averaging 65,000 cases per day, which is down significantly from what was close to 250,000+ cases per day. So those numbers are going in the right direction. And we hope that it's not just because we're not testing as much. I have some concerns that numbers will go down fairly dramatically if we don't test at high rates. But nonetheless, that overall is good news. Hospitalizations around the country, ICU beds are also down relative to this disease. It does concern us. It concerns CDC, and it concerns Dr. Quo that some of these strains that we are seeing coming into our country from other countries, particularly the UK, South Africa, are rising across the country. These are very potent mutations of the virus, and they have to be closely watched. We don't have a lot of research on them at this time, and it's one of the reasons why we believe, Dr. Quo believes, CDC director believes, executive director Walensky, that this is not the time to start to pull back on important safety mitigation measures. We should, in fact, be making sure that we keep them in place. That's an important point to make on this first slide. Many experts are saying that while numbers are coming down, they're still too high. They're still too high. And while it looks like it may be plateauing, it may even be starting to go up. We're at that really sensitive, delicate in-between time. So we have to stay disciplined around what we're doing. Now, the target metric, you say, well, what would be the metrics where we would say that's acceptable risk in a country as large as ours? And again, there's no definitive scientific measure for that right now. But what I've heard, what I read about this every day, is that 2,000 cases across the country and 100 deaths per day nationwide. Now we're down into a range that is more flu-like in terms of the bandwidth. And we're not close, we're not even close to that, as you can see in the bullet points number 3 and number 4. So that gives you some perspective on why we should not get too comfortable too fast and start to let all of these really important safety measures start to be withdrawn at this time. I want to also reiterate the recent CDC guidance that came out on February 26th that says what I've just said, that these mitigation measures should be maintained, and that includes masking, double masking if you can tolerate it, is even safer. Physical distancing of at least 6 feet. CDC is not saying to reduce that physical distancing per foot measure. They're saying keep it at 6 feet. And Dr. Quo is even saying, along with his correspondence with CDC officials, that until we find out how these mutated strains travel, it could be that the physical distancing needs to go up. It may be that they're so dangerous and so quickly, that you can catch these strains that we may have to go back to a longer or more distance square foot or foot between one another. So that's why we're not even considering or entertaining 3 feet at this point in time. It's really important to understand that. And then, of course, hand washing, warm water, respiratory etiquette. Don't cough on each other. Don't sneeze on each other. Sometimes we find the kids will do this, especially the older kids. Think it's funny, and becomes part of our discipline code. But we expect respiratory etiquette, and then ventilation and building cleaning. You'll hear about that. We have first-rate ventilation systems in all of our buildings. Testing, as I mentioned, we're continuing to test. Even though many schools have stopped testing, we're continuing to test. You'll hear about that later on the last slide, at a rate of 30% of those students and staff who are in school buildings now. 30%, it's very impressive. And then of course we contact trace when we get a positive case. And then of course I just added a piece here that the COVID cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are down in Erie County. But again, we need to be cautiously optimistic about that. Next slide, please. This next slide says sort of the point that while we are going down, you can see we still are quite high. Though that graph was really, really high November, December, and January. And now we're starting to come down. It looks like there's a bit of a plateau there, but you can see we're still not down to those 7-day averages that were in July through September. So I think before any of us can take a deep breath, we've got to get everyone vaccinated, and we've got to get those numbers down to, as I said, much, much closer to the 2,000 cases per day, 100 deaths per day nationwide. That's going to take some time. All right, so that kind of gives us the overview, puts a context around this formidable disease. We'd now like to give you some really good substantive updates about what's going on in instruction in our schools as we move to reopen in phase 2. So Ann Botticelli has 2 slides that she will share with you at this time. Ann, next slide, Mike.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. I'd like to give you some brief highlights of the preparation and the work underway as we move to phase 2. So first, we're continuing to revisit our curriculum. At the beginning of the school year, we had prioritized certain learning standards and certain lessons and units to make sure that our kids received the most vital instruction for their success. But we've continued to review. We've adjusted pacing in some areas. For example, in our lower grades for social studies, we made some adjustments. We've incorporated the Heggerty Phonemic Awareness Program, which really is there to support our youngest learners as they master phonology. We actually also have filmed some videos to accompany that, knowing that it'd be a little more difficult in certain circumstances for teachers to deliver that instruction. We're also focusing on explicit delivery of phonics lessons. So we've rewritten and supplemented that material that was already available in our reading curriculum. So now the lessons are very explicit, and we hope that that will foster not only a deeper understanding of the skills, but provide supplemental resources for the teachers. We continue to refine our remote instructional practices, and I want to talk a little bit about how the remote work that we did has actually been a wonderful segue to our concurrent model. So as we had our one-to-one device rollout, for example, we learned a lot about what solid instruction looks like using those one-to-one devices in a remote setting. And because our kids became so adept at using the devices, and because our teachers became so innovative using the devices, we actually set the stage for the change to that concurrent model, because we didn't need to take time to train students with those particular skills. So as we phased back into the building, our kids were already prepared. They knew how to use the devices. Teachers didn't need to take time to show them what it would be like in a concurrent setting. It was a very smooth transition across the board for our even our youngest learners. We built on students and teachers' understanding of the Schoology learning management system. You know, we've talked about it before. It houses all of our curriculum. Teachers use it for lesson delivery. There's activities and links and resources. But that, again, helped make that transition smoother, because kids already knew what resources were. If a teacher needed to work with one group of students, the others had that independence to go into Schoology and work on activities on their own. Virtual conferencing through Teams has enabled us to really work with both the remote learners and the in-person learners at the same time. So even if a student who's in person may not be on their screen, the teacher is broadcasting her lesson on the whiteboard. So there's that continual interaction through teams of the students in both environments. We've been able to engage our learners through innovative strategies, and we continue to build that resource pool, but teachers have pretty much mastered how to use chats, a lot of different strategies to engage students through the chat feature. They can now give badges to students for completing lessons or for doing certain types of activities. They can send praise to students. They have started to use breakout rooms, and we're about to release more training on how to use breakout rooms effectively. They've been building in collaborative technology into their lessons. So for example, using some of our tools, 2 students can be working in different environments, one remote and one in person, but working on the same document. So a lot of the different tools and strategies have been incorporated into our concurrent model. And again, we always continue to leverage our technology tools. The interactive whiteboard we've always had, but we're using it differently now, obviously. Office 365, Nearpod, Zern, MobiMax, they're all things that you've heard me reference before, but teachers really have maximized those tools so that they can engage all learners simultaneously. Mike, if you could flip to the next slide, please. And we know that our teachers need continued support as they work through the concurrent model. So we've continued to offer certain PD that we had started in the past, but we know is still vital to the success of our students. So we continue to offer CLRT, trauma-informed care, restorative practices. We have embedded coaching in every elementary and many of our secondaries. So those are basic supports that we were already providing, but now are even more important in this new world. And then we've targeted particular remote and concurrent instructional practices through our PD as well. So again, we've talked before about some of the programmatic offerings that we have. So we train teachers how to use Zern, which is an elementary math program online that supports the instruction teachers deliver through the modules. You know that our social studies and our science curriculum is actually available online to all of our students. So we continue to offer that programmatic training and also in various applications. So we have offered Nearpod training, PlayPosit training, Office 365 training, any application that might support learning for our students. We're currently offering Apple iPad training to teachers in pre-K to 4 to resounding applause. Teachers really seem to like it. But again, it supports not only remote instructional practice, but that concurrent model as well. We've offered a new Schoology course on better organizational practices within Schoology courses themselves. And we've continued to release different concurrent instructional modules for teachers to learn a little bit more about what the concurrent model is. Some of them are currently using those practices in the classroom, but other teachers are watching it in advance, knowing that they'll be part of phase 2 or later phases as the students come back. We're about to roll out a breakout room training and a co-teaching during concurrent instruction training. So those will be available this week. And then coming soon, we're planning a supporting module for students who need to bolster their study and organizational skills. We all know that during the pandemic, we've all experienced a lot of stress, and that can impact a student's executive functioning and their ability to manage their time and understand how to organize their organize themselves and have those study skills that are so necessary for their success. So we'll be working on a training to help teachers support them in the classroom. One thing we've learned is that our self-paced modules have been very popular. Teachers like the flexibility, administrators like the flexibility. They can participate in that module as a group together during a grade level meeting, for example, but they can rewatch it on their own time, or they can access it when they find the time. So it's been very useful because, you know, during COVID, we didn't want to pull teachers out of the classroom. We really wanted them to have that, that experience with the students. So the self-paced modules have been very effective, and we'll continue to use those at our next superintendent conference days. And again, teachers are always continuing to share best practices. They have their own learning communities at schools. They can use Workplace. They can post ideas in Schoology. We have office hours for every subject area to support teachers, as does IT. There are subject area Schoology groups where we house curriculum and can post upcoming information and things that teachers might need for that subject. We've provided sample instructional plans to illustrate what implementation of a concurrent model would look like in a classroom. So we continue to provide that support, training our coaches, working with administrators, offering PD to teachers to make sure that our transition from phase 1 to phase 2 is smooth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate it, you and your team. Mike, if you would give us the next slide. Colleagues, Jamie Warren is going to give us some high-level main points around our staffing readiness for phase 2 reopening. Jamie.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Cash. An important part of our school readiness is to ensure that our staffing levels are adequate to meet the needs of the next phase of our students who are returning to brick and mortar. This slide represents the ongoing staffing efforts of the HR department. In regards to the staffing of vacant positions, we fluctuate between 97 and 99% staffed. We're continuously recruiting and hiring to fill vacancies that are created by retirements, separations, and promotions. Our staffing plan includes the use of allowing teachers to teach an additional period in our identified shortage area. This strategy ensures that students have highly qualified staff to cover their credit-bearing courses. After covering our vacancies, we also have to target covering our leaves of absence. This is when a teacher takes time off for either a semester or an entire year. The first way that we cover those absences is with temporary teachers. Temporary teachers are certified teachers hired on our teacher salary schedule. Their assignments end at the return of the regularly scheduled teacher or at the end of the school year. Dr. Cash supported an initiative requested by principals to have building-based substitutes. So our substitutes have been working as a member of the school communities. They were assigned to be proactive in providing classroom coverage for day-to-day absences or to cover leaves while we seek to hire a temporary teacher. Our substitute teacher ranks include retired teachers, certified teachers, and uncertified staff. We also seek teachers to pick up additional periods to cover teachers who are out on leaves. So knowing that a teacher is on an approved leave for a semester or a year, we support teachers in picking up an extra period to provide coverage. Next are teacher aid and assistant staffing. To date, I had to update that number. We have a total of 909 teacher aides and teacher assistants in the district. Our teacher aides and assistants provide both academic and behavioral supports to our students. At this time, we have about 50 vacancies, which is about 5.5% of the total staffing. We are continuously hiring and recruiting. As recently as this week, we onboarded 11 new hires, so you can subtract that 11 from the 50. Our substitute teacher staffing, substitute teachers support the continuity of instruction in the absence of a classroom teacher. We have over 800 active subs, but they do not all choose to work daily. At this time, we are struggling to cover daily teacher absences with our current substitute teacher pool. This is an area that we are continuously recruiting in. As recently as Saturday, we held an interview and selection process for substitutes. But we're also working on an out-of-the-box solution to the staffing concern that we hope to share with the Board of Education soon. In regards to our current substitutes, we're working to improve their engagement through training. The HR team met as recently as today with the substitute teacher union leaders to review the training modules that we have available and to get feedback on how to further engage substitute teachers with online training. We will use the feedback of the union and the substitute teachers who participate in our survey to continue to improve their work experience. Thank you, Dr. Cash.
Thank you, Jamie. Very informative. Mike, next slide, please. And colleagues, our ASLs, 5 of them, Contan and Darlene and Toya and Sandy and David, just been doing really extraordinary work during the pandemic. Each of them have upwards of 13 schools, 11, 13 schools. And Dr. Sandy Wright, Cassandra Wright, will lead and provide the update for the ASLs on behalf of the ASLs, both the elementary and the secondary schools. So looking forward to hearing her update and how the principals have been working so well together with their school-based teams. So, Dr. Wright.
Thank you, Dr. Cash, and good evening, board members. Of course, we know that impeccably bringing students and staff safely and efficiently into a warm and inviting building during these surreal times could not be possible without the expert and loving leadership of our principals, our assistant principals, their teachers, and their staff. I simply need to acknowledge their hard and their heart work. We began phase 2, building on what we accomplished during phase 1. In phase 1, elementary schools successfully returned grades pre-K through 2 and 100 of their neediest students. In the high schools, they brought back seniors and 100 of their neediest students. Phase 2 built on the strengths of phase 1. In the elementary schools, they invited grades 3 and 4. In the secondary schools, they invited back grades 9 and 11. While these grades were the general rules, schools had the flexibility to choose other outlier grades. For example, some schools chose to return students at the 7th and 8th grade level because the data and the needs of the students indicated that those would be the best groups to return to school. The same is true at the high school level. The grade levels selected were either 9th or 11th, or 9th and 11th. Based on student need, the school data, the principals and their teams made the decisions that were best for that individual building. Schools with grades 5 through 12 needed to focus on both the middle grades and the high school students. The 5 through 12 schools had to consider the broad continuum of grade levels and the unique needs of adolescents and make their decisions based on those factors. All of the decisions regarding phase 2 were based on multiple data points, including the science of social distancing, the classroom assessments, report cards, attendance, feedback from families, feedback from teachers, and the student support teams. School-based management teams and the reopening teams also provided input for identifying grade levels and sometimes individual students who needed to return in phase 2. Phase 2 is an extension to complement phase 1 with consideration for future grades in order to bring back as many students as we can safely return. Dr. Cash was very clear on a goal that he set. We were given the directive to bring schools to an average of about 33 to 50% in-person instruction for phases 1 and 2. Based on the science, based on the individual needs of the buildings, and the facility's footprint is an absolute critical factor. Those considerations included the size of the staff, the numbers of the classrooms, the physical class size. Every building's capacity is different. Every class's capacity is different. Consider school number 82, a early childhood gem on the east side versus the very large Makowski Elementary School. Or consider Da Vinci, and then juxtapose that size of the building against Hutch Tech. All of those factors are considered when Dr. Cash gave us the goal of 33 to 50% in-person instruction. Ultimately, we relied on feedback from families regarding opting to remain remote. So we moved with scientific knowledge, urgency, and an abundance of caution to safely return students to in-school instruction. Our fine administrators and teachers held family meetings in several languages. I watched bilingual principals navigate between Spanish and English to meet the needs of their students. We had interpreters at those meetings to meet the needs of their families and the students. Our teachers and administrators called families, they mailed letters, they visited homes, they utilized Class Dojo and a host of other communication tools to gain family input. So it's critical to note, though, that some families found that remote instruction option is the best option for them. With this in mind, as with phase 1, our phase 2 program is designed to meet the concurrent needs of students who learn at school and for students who learn at home.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Wright. Very well done.
My
Colleagues,
pleasure.
Dr. Sharon Brown, I believe, is with us this evening. Dr. Williams will join us on another day. She had a tragedy in her family today. We send our prayers out to Dr. Williams. Dr. Brown, are you with us? Sharon, maybe you take your mute off if you're
Sharon?
there. Sharon Brown.
She's right there.
Does she have a way to get on, Darren? Maybe that, because she was sort of last moment there to repeat.
No, she's right there, Dr. Cash. She's on.
Okay, I don't see her, so tell her to get going. She has 4 bullets, really good substantive update for us colleagues.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Dr. Brown.
She can't unmute. Mike, can you unmute? She's listed as guest. Can you unmute her, Mike? There you go.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Cash, and good evening, board members. So on behalf of Associate Superintendent Dr. Tanja Williams, I look forward to providing you with updates on the toolkit for wellness practices. And we have been working very collaboratively with our medical team, as well as in conjunction with the schools. And Dr. Tanja Williams, Director Mai Wen, and I meet with the medical team. They are comprised of 3 medical doctors, as well as 3 nurse practitioners and the administrator for the nurse. And it's really helpful when we meet together as a team because we are able to share with them some of the experiences that the schools are right now going through, because this is our first time going through a pandemic. So we always want to make sure that we're connecting with our schools. And also they're sharing with us very good data points, as Dr. Cash mentioned in his opening. And it really keeps us informed. And that collaboration really helps our nurse practitioners, who are they're the point of contacts for the Erie County Department of Health. And they work very closely with the nurse and the school principal when there is a positive case that is identified. And when that happens, they immediately work with the nurse and the principal in consultation with the nurse practitioner. They work together to identify a contact list. And that has been working very well. In our weekly meetings, and in the beginning, we were meeting almost daily with the nurse practitioners because we really wanted to make sure that we were keeping track of every situation that the principals experience. And I must say, I give kudos to all of the schools. They've done a phenomenal job. Also with our supplemental school nurses, we have 1 nurse assigned to each school. And their responsibilities include they dispense medication, they address the needs of our ill students, and they certainly address any emergencies, as well as being available for any medical questions. We know the BINEX now is new with the rapid testing, so they've been fielding several calls. Also, they have additional paperwork now as a result of all the testing that they do. They complete an internal report that is actually sent to the Office of Shared Accountability. So we have an internal report. They also report to, we call it a clear system, that they report directly to the state. When they administer a test, all of that information is included right there within that database, as well as the information is shared with the Erie County Department of Health. And they also provide principals with information regarding testing for the state report card, for the COVID report card. Our school-based rapid COVID test, just a little bit of data for you. At the beginning of February, Dr. Cash, he was very clear that he wanted to, as always, as he's always done, he wants to make sure our schools are safe, and he wants to monitor any positivity rates. So as you know, Governor Cuomo no longer requires the schools to test, but we do. And the goal, Dr. Cash's goal, is 30% of students and staff to be tested. Well, we are very pleased that we exceeded that number, because the threshold was somewhere around 1,800. However, we have administered 2,409 BINEX Now tests. And also, we have 96 off-site positive test results and 3 on-site positive test results through the BINEX Now. And so that is a very low positivity rate. So what it is telling us, and when we're looking at the data and we're talking through all of the different aspects with the medical team, what it's telling us is that with these low positivity rates within our district, it is telling us that we're doing a lot of things that are right. Because before we even test, there was so much work that was done prior to this in terms of working very closely with the AS schools, with the principals, to ensure that there were procedures and systems in place for safety. And our data, it doesn't lie. So we know that this is working. And as far as the student vaccination updates, we have 514 students remaining to receive their vaccinations. And at the beginning of the school year, we had nearly 4,000 students requiring that in September, and that number has been going down consistently throughout the months. And now we're at 514, and that is because of the hard work at the school level. Our school nurses have been keeping in contact. Our attendance teachers have been doing home visits, because we want to make sure that we know where our students are. Also, the state has extended, and they continuously extend month to month. They've been gracious in extending the deadline for the vaccinations through March 12th for this month. So at least our students are engaging in learning, in remote learning. And also, we want to recognize our schools this month, because many schools are down to single digits for students that have not been immunized. And that concludes my portion of the presentation.
Very, very good, Dr. Brown. I really appreciate that. Colleagues, I want to make it clear to the listening public that the student vaccination update is not about COVID vaccination. This is for our students who need to be immunized against diseases like whooping cough, the measles, the mumps, those kinds of immunizations are required by state law. And what makes it a bit difficult to get to zero on this is because we are starting to see an uptick again of new Americans coming in from different countries, which is good, but many have not been vaccinated. So that number, as we keep getting down, then it goes up a bit for some students. So we're going to continue to work on it, and we appreciate the state continuing to extend the timeline for doing that. But colleagues, that is a very, very big deal, that bullet that talks about February at a glance, where we tested 2,400 people, a mix of students and staff, and only 3 in-school tests showed positive in school. So it does suggest that the transmission rate in school, when we follow and strictly adhere to safety protocols, does not transmit, at a high number. And it may also be a reflection of where the virus is in the larger community. So we're going to continue to do that as we said we would, because it helps keep our families and our staff confident that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe. All right, the final 2 or 3 slides will be given by the Chief of Operations and his staff, Jim Weimer, Mr. Ruiz, and I believe it's Juan Ruiz, and of course, Cheryl Kennedy. So Mike, change the slide, and Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Cash, and good evening, board members. We have a couple of different things that we're going to update you on from the operations side of the house this evening. As Dr. Wright suggested earlier, we're going to discuss our facilities in their very unique nature and their individual nature. They're all built at different times. They are unique unto themselves, and they require specific planning as far as their physical footprint in bringing back students. So one of the first things that we'll talk about this evening is our Canon Design Space Utilization Project. District Architect Juan Perez is here with us this evening. And then after that, we will re-emphasize what we've talked about in the past with our cleaning protocols. And then we have our Director of Transportation, Cheryl Kennedy, who will update us on busing. And I guess it's important to note the interconnectivity between the planning for individual schools and facilities and transportation. So we'll be able to get into a little bit of that this evening. And I believe Juan will also speak regarding our ventilation systems, which are state-of-the-art of our schools as part of our $1.4 billion reconstruction. So I guess I'd like to pass it over to Juan right now, and he can kind of update us on where we are and what the Canon Design Space Utilization Project has meant for the district.
Sure thing. Good evening, everyone. Our district architects have been working with the ASLs as well as the principals to continually update our space utilizations, plans, and database. This is very important because we are planning to actually phase in additional students into our facilities, and those numbers need to be accurate in order for us to plan accordingly. As we all know, we have 60 school buildings in our district, all of which are historic and quite distinct from each other. Our buildings vary by age and size. As Dr. Wright explained earlier, one classroom in one building for a 5th grade classroom may vary for another building. However, some of the things that you should know is that most of our classroom sizes do vary from 700 square feet to approximately 900 square feet. Therefore, our phase-in plan will need to reflect and respond to these specific parameters as we continue to bring in students into our facilities. As our district underwent our $1.4 billion renovation project, the Joint School Construction Board focused their attention to modernizing and restoring our school buildings. But more importantly, this included reinstituting and modernizing our ventilation systems to meet current code requirements. Our ventilation systems are running optimally and are monitored daily through our building management systems. So therefore, we can actually observe and see if any of our equipment has an issue, or actually we could respond to any issues. Sorry about that. And actually repair them on an as-needed basis.
Juan, are you all set? You done?
I'm all set.
Jim,
Thank
if
you.
you could go back to the top two bullets of this facility slide, I think there's some important information there that the board and the community should hear.
Yes, so Dr. Cash, the first two slides tie into the next slide as well, but it's talking about all of our facilities being cleaned and sanitized per most recent CDC guidelines. The district is working with our engineers to facilitate adding custodial staff where necessary. Mike, could you go to the next slide? So this slide should look familiar to all of us because it's been presented before and it hasn't changed at this point. We will change our cleaning disinfection procedures as the CDC and Department of Health change their guidelines. But essentially, arrival of students, we're cleaning and disinfecting all areas used by groups during arrival. During the school day, clean and disinfect high-touch areas including door handles, stair railings, and elevator buttons 3 times daily. We're cleaning and disinfecting bathrooms 2 times daily during and after school. All of our staff will support cleaning efforts to the extent practicable. Regular school cleaning and maintenance will occur daily after school. And principals have been provided with comprehensive cleaning checklists. The important part of this discussion, I believe, is that we have had ongoing discussions with our district engineers, and as we have added athletic programming and different things to our school buildings, we're adjusting with that, and we're working with our engineers to make sure that they have and are provided with the help and equipment that they need to continue to allow us to build on our student numbers as we move forward.
And a special
Cheryl,
kudo out to them,
I'm
Jim.
sorry, Dr. Cash.
Yeah, I would just think you take the liberty to give a special kudo out to our building engineers and our custodial staff because they have done a yeoman's work during this time.
Well, and absolutely, Dr. Cash, they have been terrific, as you saw, and some of our board members saw when we walked through our facilities before we opened February 1st. They were absolutely sparkling. And
That's right.
And I would also want to point out that our food service staff and our transportation and security staff have all been working tirelessly to make sure that the educational side of the district is able to do their job in educating young people and not worrying daily about all of the other things that need to happen.
That's right. Well stated, Jim. Well stated. Mike, next slide, transportation. And this is our final slide.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Cash. Thank you for having me on this evening. I want to kind of piggyback off with what Mr. Weimer was saying as far as sending our thanks out and our kudos out to our bus drivers, both with yellow buses, with First Student, as well as NFTA, our transportation staff within the Board of Ed, as well as our support staff at the terminals. They're doing a phenomenal job. They're working really hard towards ensuring that our students are safe, that they are getting to school on a daily basis. Our drivers really have nothing but, as Dr. Wright mentioned earlier, nothing but love for our students, and they're really showing it just by coming to work on a daily basis and pitching in. So along those same lines, First Student and the NFTA are following all of the Department of Health and CDC guidelines regarding cleaning and disinfecting buses on a daily basis. So what that entails and what that includes is all buses are sanitized every single day, with high touch areas being wiped down between school runs. So every time a different group of students gets on that bus, it's wiped down afterwards. The expectation is for all of our students and bus staff are required to wear masks or adequate face coverings and maintain 6-foot social distancing at all times. And I want to say we've gotten fantastic feedback both from schools, from our bus drivers, from the NFTA. Our students are complying with the mask usage. Our drivers and support staff and bus aides are also wearing it, and they're coming back to me and telling me that the kids are really being wonderful about it. So when we talk about phase 1 transportation, currently right now we're transporting about 8,000, little over 8,000 students on yellow buses. And we're going to 117 different school sites. Now that's going to include our non-publics, our charters, and our agency schools. And we're using 358 buses on a daily basis to get that work done. On our NFTA system, we have issued passes to about a little over 3,700 students at this point. What we are looking at doing in phase 2 is adding in approximately another 5,000 students. With our yellow bus world, it looks like we're going to have to add about 100 buses to our existing route set. We're currently in the process of entering those students into our systems and routing them. We've gotten information from all of our schools. That's already been completed, so we're working diligently to get that done and accomplished. What I think is really important to realize here, though, is that while we're bringing roughly 40% of our student population back to in-person instruction, we are utilizing approximately 70% of our capacity with buses. So in previous years, the highest bus counts that we've used is right around 620, 630 buses. When we get into higher than 630, that's when we run into driver shortage issues. So we really have to look at 620 being our max capacity before we don't have enough staff to cover those runs. So at this point, we are, again, as I mentioned a second ago, we're right around 70% of max capacity. And that's including phase 2 students.
And Cheryl, that was such an important point to make, colleagues, because if we're at 70% bus capacity with the numbers she has now, relative to the students who have chosen to return based on our invitation for phase 1 and phase 2, and she's cleaned up phase 1, by the way, in this process, and that means those people or families in phase 1 who said they needed bus transportation, but then actually didn't use it, that's all been cleaned and put into this algorithm. That's why this is such a difficult and has to be very carefully engineered. And you can't just say, when will all of the kids be able to come back? We're already at 70% capacity, and we only have about a third of our kids in. See, phase 1 and phase 2 will take our counts to just over 12,000 students and over 5,000 staff. So we'll have 17,000 people in to our buildings all across the system. But we still have 2/3 of our students that are not in the school buildings in phase 1 and phase 2. So there are your challenges. All right, that's well done. Colleagues, let me just finish this part in this slide deck with a special kudo to Cheryl Kennedy and her team. I've been around a long time, colleagues, and I've not seen the transportation department better run, more reliable, and more efficient than Cheryl Kennedy and her team. And I can tell you, it brings emotion and just about tears to my eyes every evening when Cheryl sends all of us on the executive team a text that simply says, yellow buses are clear.
Well, thank you. Dr. Cash, we have a question from Board Member Larry Scott.
Okay, if we could turn back to see all of your faces. Thank you, staff. That was a great job. Let's hear from the board and have a discussion. Mike, there you go. Thank you so much. Staff, stay on standby.
So I have Larry Scott followed by Sharon Belton Cotman and Terrence Hurd. So Mr. Scott, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vice President Petrucci. Dr. Cash, I just want to first commend you and all of your staff on the presentation tonight on how well the transition has gone for phase one. My catchphrase the past few weeks has been safe, responsible, and methodical reopening of our schools to in-person. And I think the presentations tonight, each one demonstrates those three characteristics very, very well. I'm just incredibly impressed as a board member and as a parent at how coordinated, how collaborative, how thoughtful everyone has been with this process and in planning for the next phase. The curriculum too, and the remote instruction, I think we continue to improve on. I think we continue to be a district that deserves recognition for the remote instruction and the curriculum changes that we've made with CLRI and social emotional learning. I continue to see it with my boys, especially my older boy. And, you know, lastly, just a couple questions. As far as the teachers on leave, some of the concerns I've heard from parents, you know, we tried to avoid changing teachers, having an interruption in teacher assignment, but with leaves, obviously, we're forced to have substitutes. Some of the questions I've had from parents are, how come those teachers that have gone on leave because of medical reasons couldn't in some capacity continue to teach remotely?
I think that's a fair question. Jamie, there you are. Jamie, can you answer Mr. Scott's question?
Thank you, Board Member Scott, for that question. So when we return to brick and mortar, the expectation was to support all staff to return. There are situations where we have accommodated staff and we've maintained the information regarding what their specific needs are and how we were able to accommodate them. But for the most part, what we were doing was accommodating staff to return to work. So and in those conversations, there was a lot of effort, such as maybe they needed to come into an entrance where they didn't encounter other people. Maybe they needed their own separate office away from others. Anything that we could possibly do to support the return. So we went from having 800 staff members make that request down to about 20 that we actually accommodated and a little over 30 who actually took a leave of absence. So it was a really big effort on our part to support everyone in any way that we could to return to brick and mortar, because as we're phasing in, it's really important to have the same teachers in front of our kids. But teachers have options. They have contractual options that if they're not able to return because there's nothing we can do to support their return, they have the ability to take advantage of contractual leaves. We didn't have a lot of people who did, though. For the most part, all of the accommodations that we put in place supported the return of teachers, and that was our goal.
So Jamie, that part's well stated and understood. The 30 that took the accommodation or the contractual leave, I'm sorry,
yes.
The contractual leave to go home, is it fair to say that those could not, their leave was such that they weren't going to be able to teach at all or be available because of their circumstance? That's what Mr. Scott is getting at relative to the parents who are questioning him. When they did take a leave, did it mean that they weren't going to be able to be teaching and it was a full leave? Can you explain that part?
I think you have to understand what a leave is for, sir. It's for someone who's having surgery. It's for someone who just had a baby. So those are the circumstances where people weren't able to come into the building and work. So they took their leave provision because that's what it's for. It's
Right.
for
Or
it's
from
for,
home, or from
Right.
home, right? They couldn't work.
right.
No, I get it. And I'm just trying to help Mr. Scott so he can communicate with his constituents. When you have a new baby, or you have a catastrophic illness, or what was the other one you were helping me?
Surgery.
Of a kind, then I can understand that they wouldn't be able to teach from home, Mr. Scott. So it's just a handful, apparently, that we have in that category.
Okay, thank you. And one more question before I ask that question. I had another thing that I wanted to recognize. And again, I've said this a couple times, the testing that we're doing and how we're reporting it to me should be highly recognized. It's very immediate, it's transparent, and I think it's really been helpful for parents to see how many kids and staff are being tested and how many positive cases we're seeing. I think that's been very helpful and helpful to staff as well. But my last question has to do with the Canon design. And I've heard from a few that the spacing from the Canon design is 8 feet. And that is preventing schools from accommodating more students to come in person, or having them shift and put students in multiple rooms to make sure that they're spaced out. Is that true? Are we still following 8 feet of distancing? And if so, is reducing that something that we should start considering as we move into additional phases?
You are absolutely correct. Basically, the CDC requires a 6-foot requirement, and that measurement is based off of nose to nose. So therefore, what we did to add this safety precaution on top of that was to allow additional 2 feet. So basically, we're measuring 6 foot from edge of desk to edge of desk. So therefore, you actually add that 2 extra feet, and we call that the personal space. So therefore, a child could sit within their comfort area of a desk and a chair and not really impact others. So if we use that 8-foot increment, yes, it's 8 foot from nose to nose.
And if you were to reduce that, Mr. Perez, to 4 and 2, how many more students could come safely, in your mind, onto a classroom that was 700 square feet up to 900 square feet? Just off the top of your head, taking one classroom, because the board members, they can infer from there, but one classroom of 900 square feet and one classroom of 700 square feet, if you brought that in to 4 plus 2 rather than 6 plus 2, how many more students in that classroom could be accommodated? Roughly, very conservatively, very roughly.
Sure. So let me start off with this. Basically, if we're working off of a typical classroom with 30 students, using the current increments that we're actually doing of a 6-foot social distancing with a 2-foot, we're roughly cutting down the class size to 10 students around that. If we actually change that increment, I could see that increasing possibly up to 12 or even 13 or even 14 students, dependent on the square footage of the room.
That's the kind of thing. Now, just again, rough 30,000 feet, how many classrooms do we have in all of our schools across all of the system, roughly? How many classrooms? Do you have that roughly?
I can't really tell you that because that's more on a specific building level. Year to year, principals actually change rooms from different uses. So one year it could be a classroom, it could be a resource room, and so forth. I can actually pull those numbers together and actually get that to you and to the board.
And then I'll send out to the board. This is poor man's math, colleagues. This is not any, okay, then bring in, 8,000 more kids. It'll just be, you'll get a sense of it, okay? and we'll get that out to you. I think that's the spirit of what Board Member Scott was asking, and we'll take a look at it. But I do appreciate the question, and I appreciate you being extra safe for our little ones and for our children and staff up until this point. But I do think as we head toward phase 3 and beyond, we've got to pull that in a little bit, and because we'll still be within guidelines. Okay, unless the strains tell us something else. Unless the strains say you got to go to 10 feet. But we'll certainly watch it. Mr. Petrucci.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Next, I have President Belton Cotman, followed by Terrence Hurd.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cash and staff. Certainly, I know I've worked with you long enough to know that you have high expectations and that your staff knows that. And so it's not a surprise to me that they've done an excellent job. And I appreciate that. I really do. I sincerely feel that our staff cares for our children and are about being as safe as we possibly can be at this point. I am concerned, however, as we see across the country where states are saying that it's okay to unmask and et cetera. I think it's just, I don't even want to discuss it because it's not our problem in New York. But what I have a question, I guess it's for human resource. I'm curious to know how many employees do not have access to the internet, or excuse me, an email address, I should say, an email address, because it appears that everything we're doing now is in the virtual world. And I talked recently to a young lady who was a food care worker, and they've done a great job. Excuse me, a food service worker. They've done a great job. And she was saying that she didn't have access to an email, and that surprised me. Is that common in our district or what? I'm just trying to figure out where are we with that.
I think it's common.
Thank you
I
for
think
that.
Myra Burden can answer that.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dr. Cash. Just as recently as today, we received a list from the food service department. They did have access to their email. They just hadn't used it, so we sent it to their supervisor of food service, Bridget, and she knew some of them did and some of them didn't, but she has all their email information now. Once we went remote, Myra was very helpful to make sure all of our bargaining units had access to email. And it's because of our remote environment, that was our really primary form of contact. So all of our substitute teachers, whether the administrative subs or regular subs, all of our teacher aides, teacher assistants, our Chief Technology Officer, Myra Burden, made sure that they all have active substitute. That's how we make sure that when we use district user now, it's everybody. It's the entire district.
Okay, so everyone that works for us does have access to the internet, email address. They have an email address, and okay, great. That's what I was concerned with. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Terrence Hurd, followed by Jen McCosey. Terrence, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Petrucci. I just have a couple of questions. Thank you, Dr. Cash. Your staff has done a wonderful job under your leadership as preparing for a reopening of schools. I was just, at the beginning when all this started about reopening of schools and the closing of last year, that we received thousands of phone calls about tablets and internet, and then district had done a very good job in moving on that. And I haven't received a call about tablets or internet service in a long time. And I'm just happy to see that we got past that point, and that we're working, with all the great abilities that we're, with our minds working together. I'd also like to say thank you to all our teachers, our teacher aides, substitute teachers, food service, transportation, and transportation aides are doing a wonderful job. Parents are really saying that they see the hard work that these individuals are putting. Students are noticing it, and I think everybody is noticing it. And how we using best practices, learning from other mistakes and moving forward as we go. One question is we said that we're testing 30%, which is far exceed what the state said. The 30%, how is that being done with the sports program? Is that including the sports program with the 30% or being tested weekly or daily, or
Yeah, what I'm
how
trying
did
to
that
do,
go?
Mr. Hurd, I wanted to start right off, but I ran into some challenges with that. But we're very close to testing. At least that's our plan, to test all of our student athletes, all of our coaches weekly, once weekly. The ideal for high school, according to some of the experts that I've talked to who are in this space professionally, would be twice a week. But the cost on that would be prohibitive. So I'm looking to move to once a week for all of our student athletes and all of our game officials, the officials themselves, the people who manage the clocks, scoreboards, do the statistic books, and then of course the coaches and the assistants. But that has not started yet because I'm trying to wait till we get our own site license, and then we have less restrictions and less costs associated with it. So we're very close to that, only a few days off, and I hope to be beginning that and starting that program. Now, if they're in school,
right now, I have a lot of questions from parents.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Cash.
No. I think that's all.
Parents about watching their children.
Excuse me?
Okay, I'm moving on to the next question. I hear a lot of, can you hear me?
It's breaking up, but go ahead.
I hear a lot of questions. I'm breaking up. Sorry. A question from parents asking about our policy of not letting anyone in to any sports events, basketball per se.
Yeah,
I mentioned text about the Section 6
no spectator.
and their policy.
Right now, it's no spectator policy because the number of students, the number of people that then would come into the gym would, in many cases, exceed 100. And we think that's too close and not safe. These are people that we don't know and can't monitor where they've been. They haven't been tested. We don't know anything about them. So what we did, and that was always the beginning. That's what Section 6 was doing from the beginning. And then they started to, once again, succumb to pressure for their one high school or their one sport, one high school. And then there's no testing going on. I sent you pictures that players aren't wearing masks. Sometimes the coaches they're in flagrant disregard of wearing masks. It's just not safe. It's completely unsafe. Especially if they're not testing. So we have our masks. We'd be very proud of our kids. I hear daily, just like you heard in some of the presentations about our students on the buses. Our student athletes are terrific, wearing their masks, even though it's very difficult to play with masks. And if they have to take a breath very discreetly, they know how to do that. And we're holding the line on keeping the environment in these gyms safe. So that's what we're doing is we're streaming the games, so these games can be viewed online. But at this point, we're keeping to a no spectator policy, as are many districts around the county. But we need to keep our student athletes safe. That's been my steady consistency throughout all of this, and we don't want an unfortunate event to occur when we're doing a high-risk indoor sport.
One of my other concerns were I talked to visually see a player play and saying they were COVID tested. Now it's important that our scouts get a look of our players and talent as they look to promote college scholarships moving forward for the school year. Is there any possibility tested that they can actually enter it into facilities and sit away from, the anybody else? That's. I mean, it's really I know that, the safety of our kids come first, the health, the wellness of our, hold on one second. Am I breaking up? Okay. Okay. When I was wants to come into the facilities just to watch a couple of kids. If they were tested or show the ability that they were tested, it could accommodate our scouts that's coming to the games, that could possibly give our children athletic scholarships.
I haven't thought about that. I don't know. You find me a best practice. Find me a best practice, and I'll take a look at it.
Okay. I just have another question. I had a lot of parents that called me about, the concerns for after-school programs. Since the COVID grade is down, our reading programs in the upcoming future or anytime this year.
Okay, thank you for that question. Ann, are you still on the phone? I'm sorry, on the call?
Yeah.
I know you and Tara and I talked recently about it, and where are we with the ELT programming?
So we actually, the state was able to work with the 21st Century programs to open them up to all of our elementary schools. So if you're talking about elementary students, if you want to send me parent names, there are flyers and things I can share with you, but students are welcome to join the programs that might have been housed. If we were brick and mortar, they might have been in a different school, but because we're virtual, students can sign up to join those.
Are they occurring now?
They are,
Okay.
yes.
That's the bottom line. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it was a whisper that we were started utilizing after school programs, and I don't think everybody was know that we were going in that direction. So if we can just get an email or something, or any literature, like you said, that we can send out, it'll be great.
Yeah, we'll get it.
I can get a
mass
I'll get a flyer to share with the board.
Okay.
We'll get a mass.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Hurd. Next, I have Jen McCosey, followed by Paulette Woods. Ms. McCosey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And again, it was a great presentation, and I like the way it's broken down for everyone. I do have some questions that I've been receiving from parents, but I'm going to start with the two that I have. When we're talking about, and I've mentioned this before, around PD for teachers, there's again, there was a whole lot where, teachers are there to be able to get PD for their support of students. And even what struck me was the new and upcoming PD that you were speaking about organizing students and helping students get their bearings around stuff. I'm wondering again, what type of PD or supports are we putting in place for the teachers themselves? Are we doing this PD for teachers to become organized and better prepared for what they're dealing with? Are we putting the PDs in place for their support and their moral support? I heard a lot, again, you have teachers who are dealing with roadblocks on a consistent basis, sometimes with the same students on a daily basis. I'm witnessing this with my own son and his teachers. And I'm just wondering, if we can be either a little more public to the public, or if, what are we doing with PD for just the social and emotional support of our teachers in general, not just what they can do in order to support students, which is very important, and I'm glad we're doing. I'm not downplaying that at all, but I'm looking for more PD to be supportive of our staff.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So that's one.
And I don't know if that's all just you, but
it's probably a mix of a few of us that might want to share, because I know Sharon Brown is also on this call. But I will say that we, even though it might be geared towards supporting a student, we always try to have a self-reflection embedded, and because everyone is going through the same types of trauma right now. Maybe manifests itself in different ways. But I think the example you referenced about the organizational skills, so even adults are struggling with that now. In the pandemic, it affects the way we process things, the way we manage our time. So even though that particular training might be geared toward how a teacher can better support students instructionally, there'll be a place in there where they take a step back and reflect on their own experiences, and how this might be affecting their processing as well. But I know Sharon, a lot of the work that Sharon's team has been doing is addressing that social emotional component for staff as well as students. So I would like her to try to address that if she can.
Sharon Brown, did you stay with us?
Here, hello.
There you are.
Yeah, so our team under the direction of Mai Wen, she has been doing a lot with our coaches as it relates to restorative practices. And they're in the process of creating additional professional development to support teachers. I know right now they've been doing, for a few months, it's called like a cafe get-together that they offer to all of the staff. And during that time, and I was able to sit in on a couple of them, or at least one of them, and they talk about their feelings about the pandemic and what they've been experiencing throughout this entire time, and the challenges that they sometimes experience as teachers and working with students and trying to assist them in their trauma. We also work very closely with our Say Yes partners. We have a lot of wraparound services within the schools. We just met last week, and we're constantly discussing what can we do to support the needs of our students. We work very closely with Kim Hosher. We work closely with our crisis intervention team to really try to wrap our arms around the needs of the students. So we definitely want more and more feedback in terms of what their needs are, and I'd be more than happy to discuss this further and share this with Dr. Williams.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
My next question is around.
No, I just wondered if that helps you. That's all. I was just asking her.
No, that did help, because I'm not receiving complaints saying that there isn't any. What I am just kind of recognizing is that I don't hear that for the public. So I want to make sure that the public knows we are supporting our staff as well. So I just want to make that clear. This isn't a complaint. This was, make that clear to everyone. And my next question based off the presentation was, if we're at 70% capacity with our transportation, and this is, I'm assuming, and I don't want to just do that, but I'm assuming it's around the regulations on how we seat our students on the bus. Is this, like, I see this as a roadblock and as a challenge, but I also see this as something that is going to prohibit us from coming in, full swing if the time was to come, but we would say that the regulations still have to be in place. So how do we, is that the roadblock? Like, how do we come back to a certain capacity if with transportation we can't seat more than one person on the bus? Is that where this 70% comes into play? And I just wanted to be clear that that seems to be the challenge, because to me that jumped out as a challenge.
Yes. Cheryl.
Yes. So capacity is the issue, and social distancing. So on a school bus that normally would hold 50 or 60 kids, but normally has a 72 capacity rating, we're putting 26 kids on that bus. So
So this is something that everybody is dealing with.
Correct. Yeah, this is.
I'm sorry.
It is. I know that there are certain states that don't enforce that social distancing, but obviously in Buffalo, we're doing what we can do to keep our kids safe. So yeah, so on our smaller buses for our special needs students, normal capacity would be 20. We have that down to 8. So again, it's 1 student per seat. And the only flexibility we have there is family members can sit together. So that increases capacity just a little bit.
Thank you. I just, again, I just want to be sure that that seems to be the challenge, because I can't see how that's something that we could mitigate if we're trying to keep folks, safe and our students safe. So I see the major challenge in that. And I just real quick, I'll run through a couple of the questions. So in the last reporting, our attendance was reported at 85%. Number one, is this still where is our attendance right now? The general number
79, 80.
for students.
Yeah, 79, 80.
The question.
Okay. For ADA and for the everyday of those expected versus those that come, it's around 83%, 82, 83% on a day. Miss Bullock, Ebony Bullock, gives us those statistics every day, and we track it on. We're starting to track it on a dashboard now, so we can share that with you if you'd like.
Yes, maybe so that our public has a better idea, because the questions were, where is the number coming from? Is it a complete percentage for the district, including both virtual and in-person learners? And is the data available that makes up those numbers? So that doesn't have to be answered now, but if that can be reported back to, to us through email, I can shoot that over to folks who are texting me this.
Yeah, we'll send it out to the entire
Yeah, they
board.
just want to know whether or not that's.
Great job with that. Yep.
Ebony just sent us an email this week with those numbers, Dr. Cass, that you just mentioned, as a board member. Yeah.
We'll get them out to you, Jennifer, and then you can share them. And any other questions that you have,
Okay.
I would put the people in touch with Miss Bullock. She and her staff are tracking this very well.
Okay. Yeah. And again, I'm being public with it because people are expecting me to ask them while you're talking about it. So this is just for communication purposes.
Mm-hmm.
The website, I guess there was some school testing, a criterion-based school testing that was happening or has happened, and people weren't able to find it. And the question was what they want to know is, we'd like to see more promotion of important information and communications via social media as well. I did, I do stand behind the fact that I do see a lot of communication with BPS through social media, but there was apparently some folks who really couldn't find, I'm not sure what school it was criterion-based school, but there was testing that was happening, and it was hard to find when the tests were and when they were available. So that I'm just putting that out there as a
I think we should answer that.
We should look at the website.
We have a dashboard that's on the website that tracks every school. Right, you can go on.
Yeah, but they had said that they couldn't find it. So there's that, and let me see. Oh, our older grades that are returning to school, I guess we're hearing that a lot of the students are, secretly more so than not, but being caught not following in compliance. It's almost as if, from what I gathered from folks, it's almost as if it's like a little game, whether they can get out, get around without the mask on, or, what I mean? It's hard for folks to be able to contain that. And are we putting extra measures in to make sure that folks are in the hallways or, monitoring our students when they're, when classes are in session in the class? So that was a concern among parents.
I haven't heard that rise to my level yet. I wouldn't say it doesn't happen. It probably does happen. But ASLs, if you want to say anything, I know the principals are all over this. I'm very impressed with the school-based monitoring of safety protocols. They've been real drill sergeants about it. Toya, what are you seeing with regard to any major refusal to wear masks in schools by some of our kids?
I haven't seen that. What I can talk to you about is what I have seen in place as far as the ability to monitor it and make sure that everybody's in compliance as far as the safety protocols. Yeah. So depending on the school schedules, you will find hall monitors, folks who have positions scheduled or located in strategically placed areas outside of bathrooms at a corner of a hallway so they can monitor 2 hallways. You'll see them, that's their duty for that period. You'll also see that several schools have escorts. Nobody moves around without that escort, and they have an adult escort them everywhere they go as far as any kind of transitions outside of what happens during the regular transition. So definitely the schools have several different things that they put in place based on their school footprint and what they need and which classes they're using and so on. Some schools have put classes strategically in certain places in the building so they're easier to monitor. So there's a number of things that schools are doing to support that.
And
I appreciate that.
But what I think on questions like this, if you have a parent that has kids in the school, then and they're concerned about that issue at their kid's school, then they should call the principal, because it's hard for a parent to have a systemic look and say anything about the system as a whole. They can only really talk about what they're hearing about at their school or through their own kids. So let's start at the school level on those kind of things and then move up if it becomes a systemic concern. But by then I will have heard about it. And I just haven't heard about it as a systemic concern at this point. Does that make sense?
I appreciate it. And I'm gathering no, it definitely does. Again, I was at a meeting and it was, I don't just bring one person's concern to the table. It was kind of a bunch of folks, and they sent me an email with questions. And the last thing, and I swear I'm done, was, we do have obviously picked up, and Mr. Hurd has mentioned it too, we're doing so much better with the internet, but we do have instances of, kind of rolling internet blackouts depending on what area you live in. And we had a few folks who were concerned because you have some principals who are holding it against the student if there's an internet blackout. I don't know if this is happening. I'm just putting out here what I heard, but I'm not even sure what the real question is. I'm just putting it out there that when it does happen and it's beyond, the capacity of the household to deal with the internet situation, and if it's specific to their area, is there, some type of leniency that if they brought it to the principal, which I guess has happened in a few instances, and it wasn't addressed as if it was, it apparently was addressed that it was the fault of the student. And I just don't want it to become, an issue of sorts where people start using that as an excuse if they're not in school or, or not following protocol. I'm looking at this from both sides. So I don't know if it's kind of a warning for us as a district, but also, if we have protocol in place in case a student really is having issues and it's happening in certain areas, do we target that area? Do we notify the principals that the area is, on the east side or the west side of Buffalo, there's an issue? What is the protocol for that for principals? Do they tell parents? I guess that's what they're looking for. And again, this doesn't all have to be answered now. I just want to make sure I put that out there, and you can send me an email and bring it back to them, bring it back to folks.
Yeah, and
but that's been a concern.
That we were really doing a good job with early was this helpline. We had an IT helpline. Myra, I was wondering if that's still a way that parents or constituents can call in if they're having some issues and get a 24-hour response. Myra, are you with me? And did you hear that long piece about weak internet? It's in blackouts at some point. Maybe you can help us with that.
Yes, well, if there is an internet outage, and I'm assuming that they probably have Spectrum service, then the outage would be related to Spectrum. So yes, they can definitely call the 816-7100 number. That is still in place. But if it is a spectrum outage, there's a limited amount of response or troubleshooting that the district can do if it is an outage in the area as a result of something wrong with their internet service. I think Ms. McCosey was also trying to find out in that event, what can or should the parent do if to make sure that the students are not penalized for the internet outage. Because it's no fault of their own, and it's nothing that they can help or control, especially if they have elected to not get a hot spot, and because they already have Spectrum service in the household, they don't qualify for the Stay Connected program, and it's just a temporary outage for whatever reason the internet went out. So I think they want to know, how does the parent make sure that the student isn't penalized? How do they go about that? And I guess conversing or communicating with the school or someone at the district level to make sure that there is no penalty for the student on that.
Right now, on so many.
You're amazing, Myra. Thank you so much, because I couldn't get that out just like you said it. But yeah, that's the question. Yay, Myra.
But we need, colleagues, we need one more step. So, Myra, like you've done on a number of other occasions, is there a form or a brief sheet or some kind of log that they could fill out if it's that issue, and then we know based on what they're saying the reason is, we could then have the proper attention to the issue, you see, and the student wouldn't get penalized. But
Absolutely.
If absent of that information, we're just sort of acting, randomly and arbitrarily, if you will, on whatever the kid says. And, if you can't see it, I don't want that to happen either. I just think we don't need kids to be being penalized. So maybe if you could work with the ASLs hear me, and we get a little sheet, we get a little something that the family can fill out when they have that kind of a problem. And then with the principal there to see that, then they can see that it's like a doctor, an excused doctor note, it's that kind of thing, versus you lose pay for the day.
Well, then,
because you had an unexcused absence. It's that kind of analogy.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
It is. And then I guess Faith said just now, my last thought is, if we get enough of that data where we're finding out that these outages are happening and it's not the district's issue and it is Spectrum, just because we pay them money as a board member, I'd really like for Spectrum to be held accountable for all this, if it's a large amount of time that it's happening, or if it's often, like, what can we do as a district to make sure that Spectrum is held accountable for all the instances that this happens? And
So-
if they're, unexplainable, I mean? So that's all another deal, but I definitely want to put that on the table. If we're going to collect that data, we should definitely be holding them accountable.
So, Ms. McCosey, we do meet with Spectrum on a weekly basis. In fact, we just had a meeting with them today. So, again, we meet with them weekly to touch base on stats as well as any kind of customer service issues related to the Stay Connected program. So, I will definitely reach out to the Spectrum contacts tomorrow with regard to this issue so that they are aware, and maybe by early next week, if not before the end of this week, I can have some feedback or input with regard to maybe how they can address some of the outages in the areas. If you have a zip code that you can share with me, I think that would be very helpful. Also, with regard to the information that the help desk requests, if there is an internet outage or something going on where the family cannot participate in classes, or the student can't participate in classes, when they call the help desk, a note is put in Infinite Campus that the internet may be out or there may be something else going on. So, Dr. Cash, we do already have something like that in place. Maybe we just need to socialize it a little more.
Okay.
And the more data we have.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
But colleagues, if you have cases like that as board members, please send them to Myra Burden because she can get a flavor that this is, you know, where this is coming from, and give Spectrum a specific set of zip codes, if you will. So just share, if you have similar parent complaints, please forward that to Myra so she can work with Spectrum. I'm glad she works with them on a weekly basis. I think that's a good thing.
Thank
Luke.
you.
Yes.
We're getting closer, Dr. Cash, I swear. Paulette Woods, that I'm going to have a few questions, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Scott. Ms. Woods, the floor is yours.
Okay, Dr. Cash, I have 3 questions that are coming from the community and community members. But before I read you the questions, I just want to commend the staff on the cleanliness of the buildings. I did tour the buildings. I did take the checklists that the union had of spacing, the traffic flow, the cleanliness, the fountains. I personally went through at least several of my schools to see that safety was being followed, that it was safe. And I agree with the statement from the American pediatricians that our children are safer in schools, and it's time for them to return. I also want to commend the staff on the curriculum, because it is making a difference, and we are unique, and we're excelling in that. The CLRT curriculum is excellent. So those are some good, excellent things that Buffalo Public Schools are doing.
Thank you.
The questions that the community is asking, and I'll read them to you, and you can answer as you can, or maybe supply information as needed. It says, what is the comprehensive plan to bring back all the students who want to come back, if that's 50% or whatever, and what is the projected date for this to happen? And then do the principals have the option that if there's some grades that are really having problems, can they change that plan and bring them back sooner? So that's about comprehensive planning. Second question I'm getting a lot of is, what is the plan to get the children functioning at grade level once they are back to school and have been tested? Are we going to shorten the summer vacation, extend the school day? There is a strong feeling in the community that our children, because of COVID and being out of school and the lags in the equipment, they've fallen behind significantly, and they're concerned about, one, testing to know how far they are behind, not to penalize them, but just to know, and then a plan to bring them up. You know, it's a positive concern from the parents. And then my last question from the community is, of the children who have they're not engaged, they're not logging on. I don't know if it's, you're saying 82% of the children are here, and it's 18% that basically we've lost them. How, you know, what are we doing to get them back and get them back into the system so that they're going to graduate and not wind up, you know, at probation or someplace? They're really concerned about that 18% that's not engaged, especially if they're juniors and seniors, because they're about to hit the streets and we don't want them there. So those are the 3 questions that the community is asking me. A comprehensive plan for at least, 50% of the kids, testing for the children to be back at grade level, what kind of remediation, and then reaching out to that 18% that's lost. So I'll shut up and listen to your wisdom. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that from the community. That's really good. I think that plan to bring back more students, and I'll just talk to you at a high level about it because the planning is ongoing. That's why you see it moving along fluidly since we began school February 1, and we'll continue to go as far as we can with as many that want to return. That's the plan. And you're seeing it unfold as we speak. But it has to be done in phases, and it has to be engineered. And remember that there's probably half, and in some schools, more than half that have opted out about a phase in, a coming back to school in person. You have to know that. And so in that case, the parent has a equal responsibility along with the schools to make sure that they are logging in and paying attention, well organized for the day to get in on the remote tablet and device that has been given to every student in the district. That's the community's responsibility. And I expect them to honor that part of the education bargain. This is a year unlike other years. This is a year where the whole heavy lift is not on the school district. It's almost equal part on what's going on at home. At the end of the day, it'll be looked back from years from now to see in that year when we were in COVID, the most significant disease we've had in over 100 years, it'll be one part school and school system, and it'll be one part home and family. That's what it's going to be. It's 50-50. So tell the community to make sure that they have responsibility and accountability for what goes on in their homes and in their households. And then we'll take care and make sure of what our part of that bargain is. So that's
But they're pointing out that you have off-ticket staff.
Let me finish. That's answer number one. Number two, on the grade levels to come back and the testing. Testing is not something that the community believes in all across the district. There's a lot of folk who say that we should not be testing in a year like COVID. What are you testing? What do you hope to determine and understand from a high stakes test that is biased anyway? It's already biased. We found that out during COVID, and it was clear before. To me, I've always felt that if it's used for diagnostic purposes and to help our students grow and develop, then that's a good test. But these tests that people are talking about implementing and executing this spring will not do that. It'll only put the families and the student at a huge disadvantage so that a narrative can be continued to continue to try to privatize these public schools and mainly our schools. That's what's going on. And you need to tell the community that. All right. Number two, this is the year, if any, that we should opt out of these exams. We should opt out of them. If I'm a parent and I've got a kid in school, there's no way I want my student to be tested this year. For what? What are you going to do with it? It doesn't tell you anything about what needs to be made up. We have diagnostics and tests and assessments that are going on every day to try to determine where our students are. And believe me, we have a robust plan on how to bring these kids up to speed and up to date. And we're going to do it. We're going to have summer programming for far more kids than ever. Our after-school programs are going to be going full bore. We're going to get our Saturday program going back. I'm working with Say Yes to make sure that they start in person again as soon as safe, and they've been going remotely. And because we've become more advanced in our remote capabilities, it is not a mess that everybody says. It's only a mess if you don't put in the time. If you're not putting in what you have to do, using your responsibility. You won't get anything out of it if you don't put into it. It's that simple. And so get online, get organized, get your work done, catch up behind the assignments that you're behind on, and then we will have remote anytime, anywhere, any place as we go forward. It's a new innovation in our school system. So if you get suspended up ahead, or you go home sick, or you have some issues at home where you have to be home with your parent, or go to work and provide for the family, you can get online with our flexible scheduling and what we intend to have in the near future. You can be able to catch up and go ahead. Catch up and go ahead. So use the resources that Ann Botticelli was talking about in that second slide. Start to use those, and you will be doing well beyond the curve. Okay, the school district is not going to take in a COVID year all of the heavy responsibilities of what happens to every single child in this domain. This is an equal responsibility between the home and the school. And I want to be very clear about it. And then in terms of how we're going to use all of this next time that's ahead of us and into the new school year, that should be reserved for a board work session. And we should just tell you what our planning is to catch up students who are behind, to try to recapture students who we may not have right now, because I do think there is a group of students that we don't know where they are and where they're attending, whether they were enrolled with us or not, or if they've just become disengaged. I think that's a real issue for some students. I don't have the exact number, but I think it is a number that needs special attention. And we're always reaching out. I think you heard through our ASL presentations in the past of how active our principals are in family outreach. They're always engaging and always trying to reach out and see where their kids and their families are. And I know Tanja Williams does an excellent job with that. So the parents need to help us. They need to tell us that my kid is not engaged and let us know so that we can begin to develop a specialized ed plan for that child. That's what we will do. So those are some of my high-level responses, Paulette and Board Member Woods. And again, if you want to devote a specific time for this in a board work session and give it the proper time, then our staff, just like you heard tonight, will be well prepared, focused, and give you a presentation that you can then share out with the community.
Only two comments. So there is no projected date yet. And the question was raised, why are all the teachers back if we don't have a plan in place to bring these 50% of the kids back? That was the
Well,
question.
there's a plan. I said in public, in the piece that was out first, that my goal is to get everybody who wants to come back by the end of April. That's the goal. I've been clear on that, but it takes each phase to determine what that is, because when you go to the next phase, you're also a back cleaning from the prior phase. See, so we learn each time, and then we see what we can fit on the footprint. I think it was very clear how complex this issue is. And if we're at 70% capacity with our buses, but we're only at 1/3 capacity with our students, where's the millions of dollars going to come from to get those additional bus routes and the drivers to go with it? Because we have a majority bus driving or bus riding school district. 28,000 of our kids ride the bus. And that goes way back to desegregation.
Last question to you.
I'm just giving you the high level. The high level goal is very systematic. It's very methodical to try to get as many people back as want to come back when we do these invites. But keep in mind, it's still school to school. Some schools are at 20%. When we invite them, only 20% say they want to come back. 80% say I'm staying out. Other schools are closer to 80% that say they would come back if they're invited. So it's a school by school piece, and then I have to put that onto the overall school district and go to plan with, operations, transportation, and academics.
Dr. Cass, just a question about technology.
Sure.
They now have machines that neutralize COVID-19 in the air. And there are several vendors who are using these machines so that in areas like our school buildings that maybe have a room that can't get enough circulation, the one machine, not too expensive, neutralizes COVID in the air, but you don't get it passed around or spread. So the school system can be extremely safe. do you think this new technology, I mean, I don't know, they could even use it on the bus so that we can decrease the risk of COVID?
I haven't heard about this. Where is this technology? Let's share it with the proper authorities and determine if it's patented material. I haven't heard about it.
I've shared it with the buildings and grounds people because they've been very helpful when showing me the different filters and seeing how safe we're trying to be. I've shared the information. We're using these machines in our church, other churches. They're using it at ECMC. They're using this information and these machines in a lot of places. And I've shared something else about cleaning supplies that are being used in other buildings that last 90 days so our workload won't be so hard. So I'm trying to be helpful so we can be safe, but get the children back to school because they need to get back to school.
We understand that. I'm not sure that's cause and effect right there, but share that idea of that product with Jim Weimer, and we'll take a look into it. I haven't heard about this magic instrument, but I would be interested in it.
Ms. Woods is referring to the Shaka Cam. I have one myself. It's called Shaka Cam.
I haven't heard of it. So just share it with Jim. That department knows how to properly vet anything that's out there. Okay?
All right. Thank
Mr.
you, Paul.
Petrucci.
Me and then Larry, and then we're done. I just had Dr. Cash. I'll try and be brief. I know that the situation you've acknowledged has been very fluid. If, let's say, Health Commissioner Zucker or someone else was to, let's say, change the distancing to 3 feet, how quickly or how would that change in terms of operational? How much time would you need to ramp something up like that if the district was to decide to go in that direction? Would it take 2 weeks or a month and a half? Just in general, is there just kind of a general timeline that you could give, or no?
I don't think that it's time to go in there. I think that that's why I led off with the slide that I did with the CDC recent guidelines and the executive director on interviews all this past week.
I saw.
So everybody else was heading toward this 3-foot thing and no masks in some states. They can be optional now. That's lunacy, it's just lunacy when we have a variant and a number of variant strains coming our way. They're already here. They're already here in New York, and we don't know anything about them. So I'm not prepared unless the board were to unanimously say, Dr. Cash, start opening schools at 3-foot distances. I'm not prepared to do that. I don't think it's safe. That means that you're talking 1 foot between the desks. 1 foot is right here. And then another foot to the nose. And that's regular seating. That's not, that's just less. That's half a 60. That's regular. That's all of the classes in. That's 30 to a classroom seating. That's what that is. It's not magical or science. It's regular seating with every desk pushed up to within 1 foot of each other. It might even be closer than regular seating. And I think it is. So now they're going to bunch you up and say that that's somehow safe. And I don't think teachers are going to like it. I don't think families who are already opted out because of their children's safety and worrying about it certainly won't come back under those conditions. And I don't know how we make anybody feel like that's a safe environment. So right now, that's not an option, is what I would say.
All right, thank you, Dr. Cash. I was just wondering, I know that President Biden announced that he wants to get a shot in each teacher's arm by the end of the month. I was just wondering how.
My arm by the end of the month.
I hope so. I was just wondering how that's going to play out.
No, the reason I say that is because teachers have been left behind in this thing. Mm-hmm. When they opened Delavan Ryder today to everyone, and I knew this was going to happen, they opened it to everyone. And that's sitting right over there in the heart of East district are largely Black and brown community, mostly Black. Gone in 8 minutes. 8 minutes, that thing was taken up by non-Delavan Rider residents. So, as I said, bring the shots to the community schools. Bring the vaccines to us. Provide us with them. We'll do them out of the community schools, and we can do a significant number of community people, including all of our teachers and staff, if that would just happen. These things where they're sending them to these community centers, 1 or 2, then to Rite Aid, then to Walgreens. As soon as you go on and try to get it, it's gone. So I don't know. I want to do it sooner, but it needs to be a different distribution model, Lou. And I've advocated for some time now that our community schools, and even in any place, suburbs, wherever, schools are the epicenter of those communities. And they have the infrastructure to do these vaccinations. Bring them to us. We've got 100 nurses. We've got medical directors. We've got refrigeration. We've got communication systems. We've got transportation systems to bring people to the schools. We've got everything it takes to do this and get it done in just a matter of weeks. And we would meet the target certainly by the end of May, we could get this done. So if you can help as a board advocate for this, I've written it out very clearly. I'll send it out to you. This is how we should do it. This way that we're doing it, it's not efficient. It's not equitable, not at all. And we're just vaccinating people, all different kinds, places, spaces. And our educators are missing out on a lot of. Some have gotten vaccinated, no question, but a lot have not. And I worry that as time goes on, people are getting more and more anxious because they're seeing others get vaccinated, but then they're still not vaccinated.
Okay. And last question, and I'll be quiet and turn it over to Mr. Scott. I heard Cheryl Kennedy was speaking about bus drivers. I was just wondering how we're doing with our bus aides, particularly this time with, children need really to be monitored, wearing the mask and everything else.
Yeah, no, they're hard to onboard. Bus aides are. They're hard to keep, and as soon as we hire some, too often they leave. Now that's during normal times, but I'll have Cheryl bring it up. She did say the staff we do have been terrific and doing a really great job. I don't think we have a one-to-one correspondence. We may at this point, but Cheryl, you could answer that question. I think that's a good question.
It's an absolutely excellent question. So we are not fully staffed. We are, we probably lost 60 board bus aides since COVID hit. So right now we have about 200 district aides, and then we supplement those with about 55 to 60 first student aides.
So 250.
Are you constantly recruiting and trying to bring people on in the usual?
We are.
Okay.
We are.
But isn't it isn't it a civil service job, Cheryl?
It is. It's a non-competitive civil service job, so the processing to get them onboarded can take 4 to 6 weeks sometimes. And the issue we're having right now is that our interviews need to be conducted via Zoom or virtually. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the candidates simply don't have that ability or that knowledge. So that's a hurdle that we're trying to overcome, and we're actually contacting them by phone, and we're walking them through the process to get a Zoom meeting going.
Okay, thank you.
That's right.
All right.
So that's the challenge, Lou.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Real quick before I turn it over to Mr. Scott, and then Kathy Evans-Brown just raised her hand. I just want to remind Dr. Rivera asked to be excused, so can I see a hand and to excuse? I see Sharon. I see second by Kathy Evans-Brown. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. You're excused, Dr. Rivera. Larry Scott, the floor is yours.
All right, I was going to ask a quick question, but I just need to make a point on the vaccinations. It's important to know that just recently, the state set up a pod for police, fire, and other first responders just for them to get vaccinated. So it's one thing to say you want teachers vaccinated, but not, you need to have a plan and need to supply the vaccination. And I want to also make another point. Commissioner Rosa actually made this very clear in some meetings that we were in last week, that when we say we want teachers vaccinated, we're amplifying the inequities surrounding this pandemic, because we're ignoring all of our other staff, most of them of color, that are in our communities. When we talk about vaccinating teachers, it should be vaccinating all of our staff, our aides, our teaching assistants, our bus drivers, our custodians, and on and on and on, food service workers. So I just need to make that clear. My quick question though was, do we have, and maybe I missed it, do we have a start date for phase 2?
Cheryl, that's a good question. I pushed her on March 8th. She said, leave me alone, Dr. Cash, or I'm going to quit. And so I think we're talking the 15th.
I think we should
she can get all of this done. Cheryl,
The
I don't want to
15th.
speak for you. Are you feeling like you and your team can do it by start up March 15, or you still have some concerns?
No, we can absolutely do it by the 15th. This will give us enough time to route really well, send out parent notifications in a timely manner. And yes, I would have absolutely quit if you said the 8th.
There you go. So March 15.
Cheryl, don't you ever talk about quitting. What's wrong with you, girl?
Okay. Is that it, Mr. Scott?
All right.
Okay. Kathy Evans Brown, followed by Terrence Hurd. Dr. Evans Brown, the floor is yours.
Thank you, team. Dr. Cash and his team, wonderful job. Very thorough, robust, very thought out information. I'm glad to hear that there's another phase that will be starting on March 15th. I guess I just have some observations because, you know, there's many naysayers out here who talk about, let's just open up the door and have all these kids and come into the buildings. We are operating in a very thoughtful safety protocol way. And across this country, most schools are doing the same thing. You know yourself, if Buffalo opened up their doors and brought in 30,000 kids, we'd be the first ones on the news, right? Talking about we set up these kids to die, the teachers to die, right? You know that. So we're doing it in a very thoughtful way, and the naysayers need to sit down and close their mouths. Secondly,
yes, Kathy. Thank you,
Karen,
Kathy.
did you hear that?
Yes, close your mouths.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, everybody will feel comfortable when the vaccinations are put in people's arms. And I agree with Larry. We're not just talking about teachers. We're talking about teachers' aides. We're talking about bus drivers, except those who want it. I have people in my family who don't want to get the vaccination because they're still skeptic about it. But those adults who want it should be able to get it. And we'll all feel comfortable. I just so happen to got a vaccination, okay? But the point is, you know, I just wanted to put those reactions out because I am so sick of people talking about opening up these schools without a plan. We have a plan. And so when we talk about putting in phase 2 on March 15th, that will bring us up to 33 to 50% of kids in these schools, okay? We're not going to be on the news for negligence. Thank you very much.
Well said, Kathy.
Right then, Kathy.
Terrence Hurd, the floor is yours.
Okay, I just want to ask quickly. I know we talk about our transportation issues, Ms. Kennedy and Dr. Cash. If it's possible, have we looked into staggering start times of schools? So that way we can have possibly solve that issue with the transportation?
Now that's an idea.
I don't think we've ever thought of that, Darren. Do you?
I was just thinking that. Actually, that's a great idea, Mr. Hurd. We've done that several times, Mr. Hurd.
I know. I mean for when phase
That's
3.
why we're the board.
Now listen, we're being facetious, Mr. Hurd. That is how we do it. That's exactly how we do it. We have multiple start times to get this done every morning. So we're already doing that.
I was just getting ready to say that. We don't start all at the same time.
Sharon, we were teasing Terrence there. You know, we had.
I know you don't see it. I'm referring to phase 3 where we can get more kids inside the schools and alleviate the bus issue.
Yeah, but we're already at what, 2, 3 start times? What are we at, Darren?
Yeah, we have we have several. Some are just off by a few minutes. We have 2 big start times. We have early schools, we have late schools. The last contract, we were able to balance those out. Dr. Cash has used receivership powers to also save millions of dollars in start times. So we are always attempting to work the start and end times of schools. And so they are balanced right now so that we get our maximum efficiency while still maintaining that students don't spend an hour and a half on a school bus.
Right.
Going through school and going home from school. We have to keep that in mind also.
And Cheryl, if you could add some of the challenges, if we go to a third start time, what that will do with buses, because remember these buses have to sometimes come back and get kids. Just add to the complexity of this when we start making additional start times beyond the 2 that we're working on.
I do want to add that most of our charters and non-pubs, we have built into a 3rd tier. So we actually have a 7 o'clock tier, an 8 o'clock tier, and a 9 o'clock tier. In the afternoon, we transport from 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock, all the way to 4:45. And that's our latest dismissal time.
So there you go. That's 3 tiers, Terrence.
Okay.
And I do think, colleagues, there's a point that I had wanted to make. Cheryl, help us for the community, and that is about these buses that we pick up non-pub students and public school students and other customers, and that impacts our planning, right? Because aren't some of those schools aligning their transportation requests with us? I don't think the board knows that.
Correct.
I know it.
I know, but you know what I'm saying, Sharon? It's not widely talked about.
You know what, Dr. Cash, it's interesting that you brought that up because when the board at the time, who was very pro-charter, implemented that procedure, we realized that it was going to impact our children in a negative way, but it was not their concern. It was never a concern of that board.
Right. So all I'm saying is as we go into these phases, we not only have to plan, colleagues, for our Buffalo public school kids, we have to plan for these non-pubs as well. And it's a considerable addition to the patchwork quilt. And so we have 3 morning start times that we have to coordinate, and then 3 afternoon exit or leave time. It's a lot. It's a lot. And so when Cheryl says yellow buses are clear somewhere around 5:30 to 6:30 every afternoon, every evening, she's talking about all of those kids, public school, private school, charter school, they've all gotten home safely based on our transportation system. And so what they do, just like with snow days, they wait to see what we're going to call. And then they call it. So it's the same thing with their phasing. Many of these schools are phasing based on what we're doing. Is that true, Cheryl?
Absolutely true, Dr. Cash. And I just want to add that even in our phase 1, we are staggering our buses into each school building every 5 minutes so that we don't create a backlog. So buses can load or unload and go right away. Yeah. So that builds in more capacity as well. It just makes it easier to get to a second school or a third school.
All right, that's all clear now. Everybody's clear. Mr. Petrucci, where are you with your esteemed colleagues?
I think we are good, Dr. Cash. I just wanted to make one announcement, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Woods for Finance and Ops. I know that many of you, we've emailed about making a statement regarding the CLRI. I know that the statement's still in process. We're just, it hasn't been completed yet,
Right.
but it will be forthcoming pretty soon.
Yes, and I just wanted you to see that other piece that I sent you, I don't know, this afternoon, because we're going to go full in on this space, but thoughtfully and not back down. So I just think there's too much good work being done. It's leading in many ways, and we want to show our support for Dr. Morrell, but also, colleagues, is a key part of your equity agenda. It's a key part of your equity agenda. It may even be the signature piece of your equity agenda. And I agree with Ms. Cotman that we don't want to be foolish, or we don't want to just be, trying to go tit for tat with anything. That's not what we're about. We're professionals. But we do have to stand in this space and claim this space for our children. And so we're not going to do a long thing. We're going to give you a nice succinct piece, probably 2 paragraphs, but they'll be dynamite, and then we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Petrucci.
Thank you, Dr. Cash.
We want the board members to edit as well once we provide it. We'll share it with you first, and then we'll take your input.
All right. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Paulette Woods, who's Chairman of the Finance and Ops. Paulette, you can combine your comment with the beginning of the Finance and Ops portion of our meeting tonight. Ms. Woods, the floor is yours.
Before you leave, Lou, can you just mention as part of your report about the progress on the Jesse Ketchum resolution?
Glad to, Paul. So as you know, the Jesse Ketchum Award was submitted, and Will Carestis has been working on with Nate Kuzma. They have believed that they have a solution that would be able to accommodate the Jesse Ketchum Award winners that may also expand some of our seats in many of our criterion-based schools. Now, the numbers may not be what everybody wants. I know that was one of the things that we were going, but based upon the data that they're providing us, it should accommodate the majority, if not all, of our students that are Jesse Ketchum Award winners. That should be coming in next week's packet for review, because I know that they want to file it next week, but I did want to let everyone know that, thank you, Paulette, that we have been working on this and it has been circulating. But I do want to give Nate and Dr. Carestis their due, because they have been working diligently on this. So thank you.
Thank you for that update. The Finance and Ops workshop or work session only has 2 items on it. It has the MWBE outreach, and it has the motion for debt financing, refinancing. I'm not sure if we shouldn't do the debt financing quickly, because I don't think that takes very long, and then will give us more time for MBE outreach. Do you agree, Jeff?
Well, I've got the decks that we just went over. I think that would be good. Jeff is talking about an opportunity that you've heard recently about what the city did with the refinance opportunity. This is a much larger amount opportunity, so I do think we should hear it. And I do think Jeff can do it in 5 minutes or less. That's how good he is. So, Jeff, there's your cue, and let's start with that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cash and board members. I'll be real quick here, because there really is not a lot to go over, but this is a good opportunity. We essentially have the ability to save $26 million based on the current estimate by refinancing existing debt. So, Mike, if you could go to the next page, I'll just go through these bullets really quick. So first bullet, again, this is just in general how school debt works, or most debt anywhere, is that, our Joint Schools Construction Board, JSCB debt, periodically reaches a call date, and then we're able to refinance at current interest rates, which in this case, interest rates are at historic low levels. Savings on these refinancings can only be used for new capital fund expenditures. So what happens is we will transfer the savings from the general fund, which we receive as state building aid, into the capital fund annually. We have $136.9 million in callable debt in May 2021. So Series 2011A for $104.5 million and 2011B for $32.4 million. So that debt is callable at that point, which means that we can refinance it at that point. The principal stays the same, but the interest goes down. The present value of the savings, as I noted just a minute ago, is $26 million, or about 19% of the debt, and that's as of February 24th. So, and we would take most of that savings in gross dollars in the first 2 years. So 13.2 million in 21-22, another 13.2 million in 22-23. That will then be used for our capital projects for the following 2 years. And the savings will change. So the final amount is going to be based on when this debt closes. The number could go up, could go down. It could change significantly depending on how overall interest rates are. So hopefully things will only improve and that number could go higher, but it could change in either direction. And the only action that the board itself needs to do is that we need a resolution will be drafted that just outlines and provides the board the opportunity to authorize this refinancing of this JSCB debt. The JSCB debt was issued through the Erie County IDA, and that will, so they, along with the city of Buffalo, will assist in refinancing that. Next page, please.
Sharon Cutman has her hand up. Do you want to ask your question now or wait, Sharon?
He can do his presentation, but I do have a question of that last statement that he said. That's the question that came out that I have on there. I am concerned. Go ahead, do your presentation.
Go ahead and ask it then if it's just about that.
Okay, so in the past, we turned this completely over to the city of Buffalo and just said, do what you want, do how you want, when you want, if you want. Okay, I'm being told that this could be put out to bid, or that we could look at other people other than having it done through the city of Buffalo to handle it for us. What's the deal with that? Is that misinformation or not?
Well, the city of Buffalo is, and this is one of those areas where we as a dependent school district rely on the city of Buffalo as our treasury function. So we're utilizing some of their staff, their consultants and so forth to help facilitate this. What I don't believe, the Board of Education, and this is different from any other school district, we cannot issue, and the next page kind of shows it, we do not have the authority to issue debt on our own. So anything we do would be through the city of Buffalo, or in this case, this is actually through the Erie County IDA.
Okay, so what you're saying is that we cannot open this up. So we can't require that the city of Buffalo can open this up to see who can give us the best deal. Because in the past, when we did this, and I think it was the last time around, I asked the question, how much commission did the bank person make off of this? And it was $80,000. And I said at that point, how is it that they can make $80,000 and we don't even have a say in who gets a part of it? So I'm just confused about that piece, that's all.
This will go out to bid. The debt itself does go out to market, and so it actually does go out for a bid, and the lowest, whoever's willing to offer the lowest rate is who will actually win this.
So
I think what you're asking about is that the folks that are helping do this.
broker fees, yes.
Right. I don't know that that's something I can look into that to find out what alternatives we have. You know, we're at a point where if we, you know, this is something that needs to move quickly. I don't know that we have the ability to. I'm not sure what we have the ability to do, but let me find out what alternatives we have in this instance.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
thank you.
talk to your counterpart with the city and say, you know, push some hard questions around this line. Do we have?
Well, because we've been taken for granted long enough. And is this an opportunity for us to pay less money or benefit from this? I just like to see it done. I think we have 2 months. I think that's plenty of time in financial world to do things.
Jeff will look into it tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. Jeff, you got another page.
Yep, one more page.
Mike.
Okay, this page just has 3 small sections on it, just to give you a little bit of just a high level. So previous refinancings have saved about $100 million in interest payments, and I just list them in here. So in 2011 through 2016, 99.5 million. These are the series numbers that were refinanced, and that's the amount. Right below that is our debt. So this is the debt that the district has. Primarily, it is related to building improvements, and it's funded through building aid. We've not borrowed any new money since 2012. During that time, we've reduced debt significantly by about $551 million. There are 3 underneath there, the City of Buffalo. So we have debt that we issue through the City of Buffalo. The JSCB debt is issued through the Erie County IDA. And then the other is primarily, that's debt that was issued through New York State. You'll see, so there is no debt that the Board of Education actually issues because we are a dependent district. But in any event, that's the amount. So 1.2 billion down to 676 million at the end of June of last year. So about 45% reduction. The city debt will be fully expired unless we issue new debt within, I think, about 5 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. And then on the right-hand side, I just have a little summary of what we've done. So non-JSCB capital spending. So the actual capital fund that utilizes in the last, basically the last 10 years, or a little bit less, that utilizes these refinancing savings. This just shows you the amounts that have been paid for in terms of capital spending through the capital fund. So about 106 million. It's a little bit different than the savings because there's other funds that are in there as well. But in any event, this shows you that really all of this capital spending that we've done over almost a decade has been through the refinancing of existing debt. At great savings. Obviously, a 19% savings on this particular refinancing is a pretty substantial amount, at 26 million. So that 99.5 million, add another 26 to it. That's the estimate right now. So that's basically it for this presentation.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, thank you, our CFO, for constantly constraining our expenses and increasing our revenues wherever we can. Okay, so you'll be submitting a resolution at the board meeting. The next item is the MBEWBE presentation. Dr. Cash, did you want to introduce that, or you have anything to say?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Woods. Colleagues, this is a presentation that I'm very pleased to provide tonight. I think in relatively a few slides, Mr. Fenton and Jeff, I think, will join for one slide, has provided some really interesting information and some specific strategy going forward around this important initiative for the board and for me on MWBE participation, increasing that. But we're going to get a sense tonight of the universe of it vis-a-vis what is the universe of MWBE here in Western New York, for example, vis-a-vis the universe of what our top commodity purchases and enterprise opportunities every year are. So you got to look at that and try to match that and see where the matches are before we can just sort of, wide generic statements say we've got to increase our MWBE. So we're going to get some more granulation tonight, and I'm really pleased the way they put these slides together. Mr. Rick Fanton does a great job for us. Also keeps his eye on the prize, and he's going to lead off with us on some of the strategies that have gone, some of the history, the more recent history around this important issue, and what he's been doing specifically to reach out to our MWBE community. And then Jeff is going to come in and talk, show us some data that I think will be illuminating. And then you'll see a strategy going forward to continue this important work. Mr. Fanton.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Good evening, board. Mike, can you go to the next slide, please? All right, I figured I would start out with giving you guys an update of what's happened in the last year, essentially since I've talked to you last. As you see with each board meeting, I now annotate each of the board recommendations with how it relates to our 5414 policy. That began in February of last year, so I now have a solid year's worth of data. In March of 2020, that's when the pandemic struck. We were in the midst of testing an electronic portal. We immediately deployed it as part of our pandemic response. That's what allowed us to continue to receive electronic bids and RFPs and perform live bid openings. So we didn't get to test that fully. We were kind of very much a try and or cut and try. So in July, we tweaked it a little bit. We started including MWBE survey questions were mandatory for all RFPs. And we made some changes to Munis to make the tracking of data easier. And that began with the fiscal year 2021. In January of this year, we realized that the biggest problem is our underlying vendor data. So there is currently a draft data management regulation to address the way we set up vendors in the system. The most important aspect of that is the ability to track an individual vendor's certificate within Munis. We also started including a copy of Policy 5414 with all of our offerings. And that's for bids, for RFPs, and is also included for the proposed new items, the request for information and the request for pre-qualification. Mike, next slide, please. Starting also with the fiscal year 2021, new vendors registering in the electronic portal could sign up for mailing lists. This was one of the biggest weaknesses we had previously. As vendors would reach out to us, they'd reach out to a specific buyer. Only that buyer had that list. Now I have a centralized location for all of these vendor mailing lists. And as you can see, as of when I did this report, we had 117 vendors registered as MWBE. And now to Mrs. Wood's question earlier. At the end of March, I will be presenting 2 virtual outreach events, doing business with the Buffalo Public Schools. We will be doing we will be advertising these probably starting next week. We're still putting the finishing touches on that. Information will be available on the website, and we will be recording the presentations for future use. And then the best part of this, after that, we're going to do a request for information. That's also part of the revision to Policy 5410. This is very generic. We are going to reach out and say, tell us about you. Tell us if you're certified. Tell us what commodities you're interested in. Tell us if you're willing to be a subcontractor. Those are the 3 primary questions we are going to ask. From that, we'll be able to generate electronic mailing lists to ensure that we include all these people in our offering activity. And finally, we're working on a purchasing help desk, similar to a ticketing system with IT, where external users can go to the site, say, I have a question, I have an issue, and get a ticket number issued, and someone can follow up on that problem or on that issue. We expect that to be ready by July of this year. Mike, next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeff here.
Hello. So on this slide, we want to give a little bit of background information, and I think it's important to note because this was something that kind of surprised us a little bit too as we start looking at the data. So there's two little tables on here, and the first table on the left-hand side outlines the total spending for the district in millions of dollars. So if you go down to the lower right-hand corner, you'll see 1026.9. So that basically means that we spend a little over $1 billion a year, and that's based on the 1920 spending. So that's actual spending. And what I have, there's columns in here, and you'll see we have the general fund. So the general fund is our primary fund where most of our spending goes through. We also have food service, that is its own fund. We also have grants, which are supplemental to these other two funds. And then we also have capital, and capital includes two things. It includes the capital improvements to our facilities, and it also includes anything related to Smart School, the Smart Schools Bond Act, and so a lot of IT equipment, computers, and other connective devices, things like that, are purchased through that, and that actually funnels through the capital fund. So all four of those funds together adds up to a little over $1 billion. That's less than the prior year because we actually had a little reduction in cost. Now, what I've also done is if you go from top to bottom, I break that $1 billion into what are called character codes, and character codes are what type of spending we have. And what I did is I have two subtotal sections in here. So you'll see a subtotal towards the top and a subtotal towards the bottom, and that's right above, the last one is right above the grand total. So if you go to that total column, you'll see that of our spending, 868.9 million is in that top group. So what is that top group? The top group, it's salaries, benefits, debt service and transfers, charter tuition, and other tuition. That makes up close to 90%, about 85% of our spend are in those categories. Those are items that we either do not spend with vendors, or they're related to, for tuition, charter schools, things like that. Those are kind of self-evident what they are. So what you're left with is about $158 million in spend that I have broken down in rough categories of equipment, contracts, facility rentals, rental contracts, transportation, custodial contracts, textbooks, utilities, supplies, miscellaneous, software, and repairs and maintenance. So those are rather broad categories, but it gives you a general idea of the type of spending that we have. In large part, where we're going to target our MWBE spend really has to be in that bottom group, and that is a much smaller portion of our spend than the whole is. And I think it's just important to kind of have that perspective there in terms of how and where we spend dollars on. And this, it's really nothing new, but I thought it was important to show that in a little table there. On the right-hand side, we have what's our purchase order data. So when we issue purchase orders, and this is in the fiscal year 2021, so the current fiscal year to date, YTD is year to date, that these show all of the purchase orders that we've issued. And this is done by commodity codes. So commodity codes roughly align with or roll up into these other character codes that you have under here. So I'm not going to bother reading all of these, but you'll see, at the very top, transportation, tuition, professional services, food products, and so on down the line. And I captured about the top 30 of them in there. And that's about 200 million in spending. So some of the items in there are in that bottom section on the other chart. Others are actually in the top section, but that shows all of them. And what we have in here as well is just showing based on the purchase order data and how these are flagged, if the purchase order is issued to a non-MWBE or an MWBE. And obviously you'll see that the spending on the MWBE is much smaller than the non-MWBE. That's the focus of what we're trying to do going forward, is how do you expand that? How do we get that bigger? And these are really the areas, not everything in here. Tuition payment, for example, at the top, the second one, tuition payments, those are really dictated and mandated by the state, and that's agencies and even other school districts. So there are things in here that are outside of our control. They're still shown in there, but largely the types of areas that we want to be able to focus in on are encompassed with this main grouping. Once you get below this top 30 commodity codes, you're in much smaller areas. Not to say that they're not part of our efforts, but we do want to focus in and show you the from the top down. So I'm going to turn it back to Rick to see if he's got anything else to add on these charts before we go to the next page.
No, I'm ready to go to the next page unless there's any questions about these charts here.
Before you go to the next page, the question, you have capital projects, 17 million. Are you including that in the commodity code or something that you can do subcontracting? This is something that you can use MBE, WBEs in, because we do have construction companies, and God knows we have a lot of plumbers and electricians that people who would want to bid on capital projects. So is that in your targeted area for MB, WBE?
Most of that is going to be under the professional services line, that third one from the top.
So it is in your targeted for MWBE efforts?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Mr. Hurd?
Yes. Could you please tell me what, just explain the lease payments? What are those?
Primarily where we've leased space, there's a parking lot with one of the schools that we lease from Mount Olive Community Church, I believe it is.
Baptist Church.
And we've got a couple of obviously leased schools. So that would make up the bulk of the lease payments. Jeff, am I missing anything there?
No, you've got it correct.
Yeah.
So they're all parking facilities and schools. Okay, thank you.
I see Sharon Belton-Cotman and Lou Petruski. I'm not sure who was first.
I was first, thank you. So thank you, Rick. I guess you got sick of talking to me, huh? But anyway, thank you for the work that you're doing in this area. I can see that in a short period of time, it's moving in the right direction. I guess my question is, this system has existed for a long time, and we have. What other additional changes must you do in order to shake it up? Because I'm thinking in the back of my mind that we've always had an issue with the raters, the people who are rating. Are we going to train them any differently? Are they going to be able to? Are they going to be required to take some courses or to take some professional development or something? I'm thinking about when you look at this. Once you get your RFI, I would think that we should be able to at least identify certain areas that people may be more be able to call to bid for information. But the information you get, for jobs or opportunities. But the information you gave me earlier, I still don't understand how that idea does not limit what happens. Do you understand what I'm saying? System has existed a long time. There's certain people that get the deals no matter what, because they've been getting them for the past 20 years. I'm just trying to see what other stirring of the pot needs to be done in order to get this loosened up a little bit, you know.
Well, and I think we're going to address a great deal of that with the RFI, the request for information.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
I said, okay. I said, okay.
The single biggest issue we have is the disconnected data. I could have one buyer that's working on something and he doesn't know that another buyer knows of vendors who may be interested in that. The fact that that was all handled via paper and manual lists just led for the potential of people getting missed, forgotten, whatever. We're trying to fill that gap by using the electronic mailing list. That RFI is going to go out, and we're going to try to blast it out to as many people as we can. There will be ads in the paper, similar to what we do for any other offering. I will issue invitations to non-local vendors via the procurement portal. And if you've been paying attention to some of the number of invites that we've been getting with the procurement portal, the reach is pretty impressive. But they have to respond. I don't know about them if they don't get on one of my lists. They're going to have the option for all of these different commodity codes to say, hey, I want to know about these. You know, I don't want to know about those. I want to know about these. Yes, I'm interested in subcontracting for something like this. So they're going to get to kind of pick what we're going to notify them about. But that's really as far as I can reach out to them. I'd love to know every vendor. I don't, unless they get onto our list in our system. It's very difficult to know about them.
Okay, I got that. But okay, once their bids come in, how does that process work differently than what it previously worked? Because in the past, literally, adults would sit there and decide yes, no, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, whatever. Okay, what's different with that? Because in this system where you have had it a certain way for so long, it just appears to me that there's a need for some additional professional development as far as diversity training is concerned. And in addition to that, hopefully, I think we had a conversation where you already told me that you have the raters set up across the board with their numbers or whatever, so we don't have that problem anymore. Or we don't know who's rater 1, who's rater 2. Correct. But I'm just curious to know, how does that system melt down so that it's fair and equitable to people?
Well, at some point, we should probably have a work session where I do walk through the procurement portal. Part of the reason that we were bringing that online this past March was exactly that. It's a very, very structured evaluation process through Bonfire. And that's the name of the procurement portal. Okay. Every offering now, since I took over as the director of purchase, I'm involved with every formal offering, which means I'm doing generally the analysis of the financial stability of the vendor. And I'm also doing the MWBE compliance part of it at the very least. And that's every single offering. So that means that at the very least, I'm asking questions when I see oddball scores. We need to get better with the writing of our criteria, how we're judging the value of the responses. We've been working with the various departments. There are times that I look at where we were at a year ago to where we're at now in terms of writing the specifications. And you go, boy, we've come a long way. And then you just think about how much further we still have to go. It's constantly.
You know, I said it's in good hands. I have confidence in you. For those of you who don't know, Rich worked with us for years at the end of the audit process. So he's seen some things that most people can't even imagine. So he knows how to fix it. And I'm confident that he will. Thank you.
It's a process, though. We will get there.
Thank you.
Lou Petruski, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Paulette.
Colleagues, let me just, because we didn't really finish the slide. So if you think this is the end, it's not the end. There's still 3 more.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And Dr. Cash is correct.
I think some of you thought that we thought that this was the end. I kind of interpreted it.
Well, we know you're the quick slide artist, so we figured 2 at this time of night was it.
And Sharon, just so you know, Rick has seen things going way back, like you said, and he's still traumatized by it.
That is a
I believe
very
it.
accurate statement.
I believe that.
So we're
Just a
trying,
quick
we're trying to help him. We're trying to help him. Okay, Rick,
So-
continue with these last three quickly.
Can Lou please ask this question?
One quick question, guys. I was just wondering, because when you look at the PO and I see what the percentage of all the vendors are, do we have a goal? Are we going to do 25 and 5? Is it going to be like a 30%, a 20%, a 40%, whatever it may be, for MWBE contractors with respect to purchase orders?
No, because that's why these last three slides are important. And I had them specifically go and search of this, and then we'll talk about it. I think you can't set percentages until you understand the percentage of the universe and then what percentages MWBE companies are. They're far less than 30% of anything. You'll see that in these slides. So we can come back to that, but I don't think it. I think we're a long way before we start setting some automatic percentage targets.
Are we ready?
All right, let's go through these, and then we'll come back.
Excellent.
Go ahead, Rick.
To Dr. Cash's point here, what I did is I went to the state and Erie County websites and I pulled their MWBE list. They're the two primary certification agencies that we deal with. And what's interesting is if you go to the New York State MWBE directory, they only have 223 MBEs listed for the entire state. That's it.
You see?
And 116 of those are in Buffalo.
And that's the total universe, colleagues. Now go down to Erie County, Rick, and I want to make a point after you do Erie County. Go ahead.
No, we'll do. WBEs are a larger population. Erie County, only 82 MBEs on their list, with 50 of those within the Buffalo city limits. Again, more WBEs on the county list. What was interesting is the demographic there shifted. A much smaller percentage of the WBEs are actually in Buffalo. And then they have 50 that are dual qualified, with 36 of those in the city itself. And our district vendor file has a flag for MWBE. As of when I pulled this data, we had 107 vendors listed there. That's out of a population of 15,000 vendors in our vendor file. So again, it is a very, very small percentage.
Colleagues, that's an important point, and I wanted the staff to do the research to show you that, because that universe is just a pebble against all of the people that do business. We have 15,000 vendors that try to do business with us every year. So we've got a choice. We can either, and then out of these MWBEs and MBEs, there's only, lined up to that slide before this one, there's just a fraction that can be in the game at any time, unless they expand their business enterprise, and unless we help them do that. Because you own a floral shop over on Fillmore, right? Or a particular shop that does herbals and remedies and things that we all go and buy over on Genesee. That's not going to line up with RFPs or RFIs that we bid on every year, or that we put out an RFI for or an RFP for every year. It's just not. And then you're going to keep closing it down. And that's who's in this group right here. So I feel you with what the work is and the passion, but unless we're dealing with sort of the mechanical engineers, the electrical engineers, custodians, plumbers, carpenters, masons, after that, it starts to get outside of the bandwidth. And that's what I had them do the research on. That's what we've looked at. We put them on the big board, who these people are, who these folks are. So it's a challenge. It's a big challenge, and we need to start it and grow it. That's what this is. So 35 or 40%, you see how that wouldn't be appropriate because it's just a fraction. You put this number against 15,000. That's the percentage you can shoot for because that's what it is. It's kind of it's illuminating, and yet it shows where the work needs to be done. But it's not just a matter of saying
Dr. Cash, what you're doing is giving us a baseline, showing us the neglect, from the past to either gather the information, broaden our outreach, advertise in other places. You're showing us what the Old Boy Network is giving us as history. And I thank God that we are setting a standard and a demand for something better.
We're going to try.
Sharon Belton-Cotman has her hand up.
We're going to try. You want to go to the next two slides and finish, and then let's talk?
I don't want to ignore Sharon if her hand is up.
Okay, I can wait, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rick.
So, thank you. So this is a compilation of all the data collected from the board awards that have gone through. And remember, our policy is written for just those items over $25,000. So over the last 13 months, we have had 104 competitive awards. We have had 485 total responses to those competitive awards for $37 million. MWBE vendors represent 10% of all the respondents. So 48 of those 485 came from MWBE. Now you compare that to the ratios, that's actually an excellent showing. An excellent showing. MWBE vendors have been awarded in 14% of the awards. Again, this number is important because that's even greater than their percentage of responses. MWBE vendors represent 5% of all the competitive awarded amounts. So 5% of that $37 million. 11% of the competitive awards are compliant with the MWBE policy. Then when we get to the non-competitive award data, so roughly 2/3 of all the board's awards are non-competitive. 218 awards, $65 million. MWBE vendors have been awarded in only 3% of the non-competitive awards. MWBE vendors represent 1% of the non-competitive award dollars. So 1% of that $65 million. Only 3% of these awards are compliant with the policy. And the final point there, unfortunately, the way that the data has historically been stored, it doesn't differentiate between WBE and MBE. But doing some analysis of the actual awards, it's roughly an 80-20 split between the two. And I think we got one more slide. Mike, if you would. And this is the actual payment data. So over the last 3 years and then this year to date, you can see where we went from 1.4 to 2.1 in 2019. 2020 and 2020 needs to be taken with a bit of a grain of salt because of the pandemic, but 1.7 there. And then this year to date is 1.4. We're actually projecting that this year is going to be our best MWBE spend year. That's assuming that the straight line projection comes through at $2.4 million. It's also important to realize that this report just captures those certified vendors. The board may remember that we bought a bunch of thermal cameras for the reopening of the schools.
Right.
That vendor is eligible to be an MBE, but has never filed the paperwork. So this number would be $250,000 higher with that vendor. APOT is our provider of occupational and physical therapy. They qualify to be a WBE, and we spend millions of dollars with them, but they've never done the paperwork. I did mention Mount Olive as one of our rental entities. They are a 503C, so they are not eligible to be an MWBE. So there is greater spend than is necessarily encompassed by the data here.
Okay, Rick, thank you so much. Now, colleagues, please go to the open screen mic and let's resume the conversation. Thank you, Rick, really well done. And Jeff, Board Member Woods, back to you.
Okay, that is a good amount of data. It doesn't make us look good, but I thank you for gathering it. And our first question is hand up from Sharon Belton-Cotman, our board president.
Okay, thank you. So I guess the next step in this, in my mind's eye, is how do we grow this and in what manner? And I'm curious to know what our current MWBE vendors can say that can help us improve it for others. I'm wondering if there are any incentives that we can put together for our vendors who will subcontract with MWBE. And I guess there was an idea floated some time ago about providing additional resources or making it easier for the small businesses to receive money or to receive stipends similar to what the county does. So I think this is great. I just think we need to have another meeting on this. The hour is late and we need to talk about next steps in addition to that. But I really would like to see if we could get a survey and find out from our MWBEs that we're currently working with if there's some things that we can do better to help. I think we can start with that. I just know that I think we should put some things in place because we need to grow Buffalo and we need to be big about boosting Buffalo in every respect. And we have vendors that do millions and millions of dollars with us, never give back, not one penny to the community, never do anything extra for our children, and have done it for the past 20 years. And I think it's time that we start looking at things differently and see if we can get other people a piece of the pie, that pie, So
colleagues, to Ms. Cotman's point, we have some ideas, and I think we should devote another session, soon, of hearing some of our ideas of how to grow this. And then also reaching out, I think, to the vendors that align currently to this work. I think that's a good idea to hear back from, have a focus group with them and hear how we can help them. I thought I saw, Rick, where you have some kind of session plan to reach out. Let me see over here.
Yep, March 31st, there are 2 sessions planned.
Yeah. And so there's an opportunity to talk and get some feedback, some specific feedback on how we can support, how we can give them more information on a regular basis about these opportunities. Some of them may have talents and interests that they haven't thought about and can start to switch some business ideas and business plans and so forth. Or they can do startups, they can do startups and, it's an old saying, you never get good at something if you don't get some experience at it. And if you're never getting an opportunity, you're not going to get good enough to compete competitively. So we agree with all of that. And I just did want to show you, though, that because even WBEs, colleagues, are not necessarily MBEs. A lot of businesses put a W out there and they're really a W instead of a WBE. I'm just talking to you. And so I'm not saying don't support. That's why Rick broke it down with a dual, where you're a W and you're an African American, woman. So that business you certainly want to support. But a lot of our 15,000 vendors could easily just, if depending on where we go, could just switch out who's the LLC or who's the CEO and put it in name only. I've seen that happen for everywhere I've been. Miami was big at that. Miami was huge. And of course, even Memphis did it as well.
Dr. Cash, can I ask if there were 40 vendors at least that attended previous sessions on wanting to do business with Buffalo Public Schools? They had a variety of products, services, and talents that they wanted to offer to Buffalo Public Schools. There were construction companies who did not get any information on the capital budget. They did make some suggestions about the reasons smaller companies can't do business with governments and school districts is because we don't pay for 90 days, or we take 90 days to issue a contract. So they can't sustain themselves that long. They can't wait that long. They don't have long credit lines to finance a billion-dollar business like us. So there are some things that are definitely problems that we could address. And I do have some suggestions from the experience Erie County has had to make it more easier to get MBAs. That list that he said, it looked like it's labeled 400 minority businesses in Western New York, not in the state. Did I read that wrong?
Hold on just a second there. Let me call up my copy here real quick.
One of them is New York State, it says.
And who let Rick on a vacation? Isn't Rick on vacation? Look at his background.
Yes.
He's in heaven. That's the cloud. He's in heaven.
Actually, I'm doing some demo in my house where I'm rehanging some drywall. So everything I own is actually behind me right now because the back of the house is empty. So that's why we have the background. So there.
Page 5, Rick.
I'm sorry?
Page 5.
Right. There's 223 MBEs on the state list that are located in Buffalo zip codes.
What? It says New York State on the Chevron.
It says Western New York.
And in Western New York.
Oh, yeah. 223 in Western New York and 116 in Buffalo zip codes. My apologies there.
Okay.
Okay, so 200 is a little bit bigger number, but I still believe we need to get together and speak about outreach and just as we've been talking before, bid procedures, etc.
But don't you agree that the county has some responsibility in this as well? Come on now, you know, we've got to work with the county in this in some way. And Lou, would you know if the city has a list of also? Do you know if that list coincides with the city, or could it be with the county, or could it be independent? Do you know anything about that?
A little bit, Sharon. We work off the county because the county does a certification. So we help people, but the county's the certifying agency.
I think we need to put more pressure on the county to do more. I really do. We need help. We can't do everything. We just can't.
Sharon, I know a lot of MBEs who don't want to spend the money and the time and give all the information to be certified and get no result from spending that money. So there's a lot bigger universe out there, and we need to be able to reach out. So, you know, it's to be continued as far as I'm concerned. I appreciate that we're starting to make an effort.
Yeah, but you gotta invest in yourself, Paulette. You got, how much are we talking about to get certified and do all of the things you're talking about? You can't enable that and expect there to be a different result. It's what I find when I go and try to get more minority teachers in the Buffalo. You know, these are 31 years old, 28, 33, and they'd like to be teachers now, but they're going to have to go back to school. They're going to have to get certified. They're going to have to put money in up front. And if you want to do it, that's what you're going to have to do.
Traditionally,
Dr. Cash, all I can say to you is that working with the county, what I have found is the first year out, we got a large number of people who had faith and they paid and they divulged their information. They got into the process. And after a year or two, when they got no information, no bids, nothing, they weren't so enthused.
Okay. Well, we're going to.
Anyway, can I do a commercial here right now? So that people, if someone is listening, there is money presently available through the Small Businessmen Association, SBA, for small businesses. The Biden administration is pushing hard for the next, until March the 10th. There are two loans. There's the PPP and there's the EDIL. And if there's small businesses out there that have lost money due to the disaster, it is available. And you should go out there and look at this website and take advantage of it. The administration, the new administration, has acknowledged that they did not loan enough money to small businesses. So please,
Well, they did, but they didn't get it. They put it out there, but you know who got it. The small business didn't end up getting it.
Until March the 10th, they are doing special treatment to certain groups of people. So take advantage of this time. For those, invest in yourself.
All right.
That's right.
I was just going to make one quick comment that I know many times our MWBE vendors have difficulty with bonding. So that prevents them from bidding on a lot of the larger projects.
Yeah.
So
that's why we need subcontracting.
We got to help.
Okay. I'm just hoping that the public heard that March 31st, can you announce that again, that there's going to be opportunities to learn how to do business with Buffalo Public Schools?
Yep, March 31st.
Where and when, Rick?
They're both virtual presentations. We're actually finishing up the advertising. That should be, if everything goes well tomorrow, that should be in Sunday's Buffalo News. It should be in Rocket and Challenger on the following, and I'm not sure which one's a Thursday ad and the other's a Saturday ad.
Challenger and the Criterion. Make sure it's in there.
Correct.
And what about Facebook and other electronic things?
Rich said that he was going to video those sessions so they would be made available for people who missed that. Okay.
Who missed it.
Mm-hmm.
This is excellent. Give everybody a good hand for Rick. I think Rick is all over this.
Great job.
And
Thank you, everybody.
he's trying to do what you.
And Jeff,
Thank you.
we really appreciate the work, Richard. Thank you.
All right, Paulette.
Well, I don't have anything else. Pardon me?
Leave me. Take a vote.
Take a vote.
Just say good night.
Take a vote to adjourn.
Oh, can I get a motion to adjourn?
You don't need one on the committee.
Okay, well, great.
Good night.
Bye.
That's a good meeting, colleagues.
Thank you, staff.
Everybody.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Dr. Cash.